Okay, good afternoon. Thank you for joining us for the 47th annual, I guess, Pennsylvania Vector Control Conference. Like last year, we're going virtual. Hopefully, we'll be back to see you guys all in person next year at an upcoming session. So before we get started, and I'm only going to take up a couple seconds of your time, my name is Ray Delaney, and on behalf of the board of the Pennsylvania Vector Control Association, I want to welcome you to our conference. We have a pretty tight and I think packed agenda, and I think there's a lot of interesting talks. There's also some, it'll be some fun ones. So hopefully it'll be entertaining and enjoyable as much as educational. Aside from you guys who have registered and are attending and joining us today, I really want to thank the sponsors, our sustaining members that are listed here on my slide. Valent, Adapco, Central Life Sciences, Clark, Bell, Viseris, Leafitech, are great partners, and I appreciate everything. Each of the representatives from those companies, those organizations, do for PVCA. Just about all of them are very active in our group. I also need to thank Emily Mader, who is, I guess, our host or co-host for the next day and a half. Emily's with the Northeast Regional Center for Excellence in Vector-Borne Diseases. You'll hear a lot from her over the next day and a half, but we wouldn't be able to pull this off without her and her group at the NEVBD or at Cornell. So without further ado, we're going to start off with a welcome from the governor.
Hi, I'm Governor Tom Wolf. Welcome to the PA Vector Control Association Annual Conference. This conference provides an opportunity for networking, education, and collaboration among vector control professionals. You do important work to protect the public health and improve the quality of life for all Pennsylvanians. And this annual conference brings an important opportunity to share best practices and address new challenges. Our Commonwealth relies on your work, which reduces the spread of disease from pests and disease vector organisms. Thank you for your commitment to upholding the public health and serving your communities. I hope you have a very successful conference.
All right, and so with that, to get us started, I'm also going to go through a few housekeeping items for our participants in the meeting today. On your screen, you'll see a little bit of information letting our audience members know that during the conference event, you actually won't have any audio or video options in your Zoom experience. However, you do have the opportunity to interact with our presenters through the Q&A feature, chat window, and polls. So the Q&A feature is a tool for you to use to ask questions of our presenters related to their content. We do ask that if you use the Q&A features to submit questions to our presenters, that you use the speaker's name. That way we can make sure that your answers are provided by the correct person as we go through the event. There is also the chat feature in Zoom, and we ask that you use this mostly for technical issues. So if you're experiencing any connectivity issues, please reach out to me using the chat. And save your questions for the speakers through the Q&A feature. We also wanted to let our attendees from New Jersey know that part of the recertification credit process for New Jersey is that you're going to need to complete a brief form online at the start of each day. I'm going to send the link to this form through the chat. So please pay attention to the chat on your Zoom if you want to see a link to this form. But please do go ahead and take a moment now to complete this form where you're going to upload a photo of yourself that's time-stamped and submit your information. And this is going to help us make sure that you get your CEUs processed for your attendance in this event. Lastly, we are going to be using polls in this event. This is another recertification credit documentation process for these online Zoom meetings. Anyone in any state seeking CEUs is going to need to participate in these polls. We'll have several throughout the conference event. They are very brief. and will only take about 1 minute for you to process, though we will also have them up for about 5 minutes in case you step away from your computer and you don't miss this opportunity. But please pay attention to those if you're going to be participating in today's event for CEU credits for your pesticide applicator license. And with that, we can go ahead and start with our first speaker in today's event. I'd like to introduce Robert Corrigan, who will be presenting on city rats. Robert, please go ahead and share your screen.
So Emily, I went to share my screen and my slides all of a sudden don't appear. Let me see if I can get those back up.
All right, looks like you're all set.
All right, thank you. Always interesting, right? So hello everybody and good afternoon. Or for myself, it's good morning. I'm attending from the Pest World Conference in Las Vegas. And but it's not early here. It's 9:30 our time. So it's great to be here. I do want to say thanks for the invite. And you can see here by title, my name, Bobby Corrigan. I'm by career, by training, a rodentologist. And specifically, I only work with urban rodents, and which pretty much, especially for the East Coast here, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, New York, and the Northeast, it's only 2 rodents we're concerned about. That's the house mouse and the Norway rat specifically. And I'm going to focus most of this, as you can see in the title, City Rats, Important Updates, Vector Control Professionals. And for all the vector control professionals, just as the governor said, your work is frontline, it's critical, it's essential, and it's cutting edge relative to rats and mice, even though sometimes in terminology, rats and mice aren't listed as vectors, but they certainly are when you think about, many, they can directly transmit certain diseases, so it doesn't even have to go through an intermediate. But nevertheless, city rats and rodents in general are important in the vector control world. So let's jump in. It's an interesting area. Let's see, I'm gonna try and use, again, I want to say thanks to BPCA, thanks Ray, and thanks Emily. We've been hard to track down these last couple of weeks just because of the busy schedule, getting ready for conventions and entomological society meetings and what have you. So appreciate all the patience. So this is the guy, and this is not a brief biology lesson by any stretch. Nobody here attending this meeting needs to know who that is, and we're not going to cover its biology and life cycle and number of pups or anything like that, right? This is just about updates in city level rat management issues. And I'm going to focus specifically on, the salient points as to, in this short 45, 50 minutes we have together this afternoon, what are some big things we need to keep in mind going forth with this animals management, right? There's, of course, it's a big world of rat management in all different levels, and much of it, in addition to what we cover here, you can find online these days. But I will start out a little bit by mentioning, this is just, October 22nd, as you can see. I work out of New York City. That's my base. That's where I live for the most part. I'm a consultant also with the New York City Department of Health. And right now, we have leptospirosis issue going on. I think the word outbreak is probably a little bit too generous in this regard, but nevertheless, and these numbers went up just by a couple, over the past couple of days, but there is lepto showing up, and it's not in clusters. We don't have a real firm grasp as to what's going on with this particular issue. Everyone's keeping an eye on it. But I think from a rodentological point of view, I think it does point to the view that We do know the numbers of rats in general and rat complaints are way up in New York City. And I suspect it's going to be a case of we're not going to be able to identify the distribution of the spirochetes, but we do know because the rats seem to be fairly pervasive and they're coming back from this pandemic and they're exceeding whatever equilibrium point they were at before the pandemic, that's for sure. It's a resurgence phenomenon that happens with population biology. I think the spirochetes are probably also more distributed, which probably is contributing to this. And we may never be able to get to the exact etiology of these occurrences since there are no obvious clusters and etiology of the clusters, but nevertheless, this is going on as we even meet here today, right? And there's not a vector control specialist at this meeting that doesn't realize that leptospirosis in rats probably the most identifiable serious diseases associated with that animal. Second to, or even perhaps some cases more than, foodborne illness. Over the years, over the past couple of years, I think there's been plenty of publications. You're going to hear from Dr. Matt Fry in a little bit this afternoon. But, Columbia and a group from Columbia, Ian Lipkin, who's in the picture there on the right, and, his graduate students have worked over the past couple of years collecting rats and mice and published a couple of several papers. In fact, I was, happy to be part of those teams in those publications, what have you, that this title here with just the mice, they also have a paper out on rats. But, this received a lot of press, right? Hopefully everyone in the vector control world at, the Northeast has a chance to review these because there were interesting disease discovery, such as antibiotic resistant bacteria also being associated with, in this case, the mice and so forth. But it's no surprise, rodents continue to be important, public health pests. This paper, which came out this year, an outstanding paper out of vector-borne and zoonotic diseases, another, great summary, as you can see in the title, paradermistic rodents, that's the rodents we're talking about, as reservoirs for zoonotic foodborne pathogens. So there's no surprise here, the rodents go way back at foodborne pathogen transmission, the most common ones, that we all read about and hear about, but Campylobacter, Salmonellosis, and, E. coli, and so forth. But so no change there. So where we're going, of course, is, we all know this is not a review of the importance of these, but are there any breakthroughs? Are there any updates as to the management issue, right? And again, that's somewhat my job with you guys today. I've seen this in a science parade, science, march a while back, and I thought it just pretty much summarizes us in this meeting. These two young gals, one says, "Got plague? Me neither, thank a scientist." And I'd probably add to that, specifically vector control professionals and pest management professionals specifically, right? So but as we all know, the general public, when you say, we're here to manage the rats of a block, whether it be in Pittsburgh or Philadelphia or New York City or Newark, most people have no idea what's behind the scenes on the benefits of effective management. Sometimes they're like, well, I just hope your poison's really good because they're really bad and please do something to take care of this. I hate rats. That's their summary of it, right? And we're not going to get into a lecture with those folks in the public. I certainly don't. But I'm like, well, you know what? Behind the scenes, there's a lot of people trying to make sure that, quote, the plague, and it doesn't have to be the plague, but any plague, a plague, even a leptospirosis, if it gets out of complete hand, is a plague, right? That a lot of people are at work at this. So, here are the updates, you guys. They're going to be IPM updates, if you will. We all get IPM, we all know IPM and so forth, but, there's some significant innovations. There's some significant promises on the horizon that I'm pretty excited about. I mean, I've been doing this quite a while, been involved with rodents for over 30 years. So it's been my career. And it's kind of a very cool time to still be involved with this. However, when people ask, me in interviews or I sit down to think about things, you know, if we keep it simple, stupid kind of thing, and we look at the overview, when people say, what's the big picture of managing rats in cities? How would I break it down? And the way I see it as a scientist is the biggest lift is our refuse stream management for a city. When a city comes to me and says, right, you know, we need a consultant to help us design programs, and I do that around the world, quite frankly, I'll say, okay, let's look at the big picture. But if you're expecting me to say, here's the best poison bait you can use, that's going to be the last piece, the very, very last piece. Because if we're going to manage city rats, you know, we're going to have to manage refuse. I think that's kindergarten level information for everybody probably here. We also have a critical part in keeping them out of our buildings with pest exclusion programs, which is frustrating as most of the public, when you say, you know, you need to plug up the holes in this restaurant, outside, inside, or the holes in this, you know, housing project or whatever it may be, it's back to, yeah, but what bait's he gonna give us? 25% proactive surveillance, very critical. I'm going to spend significant time on that, you know, because, you know, we, for the most part, have been managing rats in cities without a very strong emphasis on data and data analytics. And so we now have new technology that's going to help us a tremendous way in that. We have data is going to drive city programs, right? And those of you involved with municipalities and cities, you know this, you get it. Everything's data, right? And then finally, of course, and it's not minimized, but I kind of make the point with going 19.999% of quality, carefully designed, strategized poison baits and trap services. And the reason I left that one tiny decimal out there is people ask, well, what about cats? And that's where the cats I would put in to round up the entire, is almost non-contributory whatsoever, not to mention public health issues associated with cats also. So if we talk about just refuse in 1 or 2 slides and just pest proofing 1 or 2 slides, you know, I had the honor of joining with National Geographic magazine 2-3 years ago. They put it in an issue and what have you, but I went out with the photographer, Charlie Hamilton James, and met with the writers and what have you, and we went on tours of, in our case, New York City. But it's the same for all of the cities of the East Coast, for the most part, right? Our cities are the same. It's just a matter of numbers and density of the citizens of these cities. But when we were out, I said, you know, we have to capture the conundrum, the difficulty, the awkwardness of, we have a big city to manage and we have millions of pedestrians. New York City, 8.5 and probably more than that. But nevertheless, let's just say the census shows 8.3, 8.4 million people. How do we do that? How do we collect trash? How do we manage litter, so forth, in some kind of practical ways? Because at the same time, a litter basket just like this, which is still out in our cities, many, many different cities, of that design where people can easily get rid of their litter without having to go through pushing through doors and a big hassle, otherwise they'll drop it on the ground. It's a conundrum. But at the same time, you know, all night long, these litter baskets, which are going to be collected in the morning time, usually are filled or 3/4 of the way filled, just like you see it here, by 5 p.m. on people's way home, on the way to catch the subway or train. And all night long, thousands of baskets are rat cafeterias. So when a city wants to, you know, ask, how do we do this? It has to start, in some cases, with a complete look at all the aspects of how does the city manage its refuse stream. Just litter baskets alone, we're not even talking about the collection from the pails and the bags and so forth, what have you. This is a heavy lift, and often so heavy that cities like, well, you know, that's great, and we'll need to look at that some other time, but right now, maybe we need to hire more exterminators and put that into the city budget. Well, okay, but more exterminators cannot offset this kind of a scenario. Without any doubt, they cannot offset that. Similarly, of course, what we can impact is through our code, our city codes and inspectors and boards of health and what have you, we can impact at least trying to enforce the code for sanitation. Even though here, for example, it's still frustrating, as we're always going to have, you know, if you have 100 restaurants, you're going to have 20% of them that always don't do it right. You know, and you see all those tears in that, you know, I took these pictures doing an alley inspection. You'll see all those tears in those black bags and what have you, and the garbage and so forth. Those are from rats. Those are from rats. And that particular day, I probably had 18, 19 of these just like this. But I had many that were very clean, following the code, so forth and so on. But the rats only need that 19. They don't need perfection. In fact, rats and mice are very unforgiving of human beings when we make mistakes with litter and baskets and bags, and, you know, the ways we drop food, and food shrapnel comes at 40 different ways in a typical city. You know, they're very unforgiving if we leave any of them with any opening. Well, then we have pest proofing, right? To skip over pest exclusion, and there's many axioms associated in public health, as you all know, you know, relative to rodent control. One of my favorite axioms is pest proofing is in fact prevention. If they can't get in, they can't affect building, at least interiors, and, you know, affect, you know, restaurants and urine and feces and so forth, and apartment buildings with rats. Pest proofing is elementary, it's basic. But here too, if we were to give Homo sapiens in cities and citizens a grade on how well we pest proof our buildings, even if it's in the CODA, which it is in most city CODA, that you're supposed to keep buildings tight to keep vermin out, we get an F as a grade on that. We get an F. Unless it's something very specialized and someone's paying attention to it. Even sometimes in schools, I see, well, the school's still not pest proofed, and yet we don't want to be using pesticides in the school, right? We don't want to let the mice in. So pest proofing is pest prevention. Of course, you know, the golden rule, anyone who gets a career in public health realizes in the first paragraph of definition of public health is the word prevention, right? So if we just, you know, look at this, for example, here's an alleyway, it's fairly clean. Garbage is fairly managed. People are actually perhaps trained to keep the dumpsters clean, which is crazy in itself, and use the rain guards and so forth. But if you look at the door to the back of that restaurant, it's, you know, totally wide open. The door's closed to human beings and raccoons, perhaps, but to rats and mice, and straight in, no problem whatsoever. You'll notice the bait box. When I talk to restaurant people, I said, you know, this door has to be rodent proofed. You're letting in rodents, they're foraging in the restaurant at night and coming back out. You don't even realize it, and it's disappearing down the drains and so forth. Yeah, but we have a pest control guy, and let me show you, the pest control guy is putting out really good bait boxes with really good strong bait. So clear, you know, and go ahead, take off 3 or 4 points on my health inspection, because I'm still going to get, you know, the good grade. But yep, I'll give you a couple points that I did not do my doors. Well, what's the point? You know, this bait box is not going to do anything to prevent the rodents from getting into that area. So it's a situation where it's frustrating. You know, I call it the unseen open doors of closed doors. Sounds crazy, but here's what I mean by that. I mean, that's an open door. Now it's closed to people, just like I said. That's wide open to rats and mice, both species, right? Everybody knows on this call, for example, you know, 6 millimeters for a mouse, 12 millimeters for a rat, right? That's all they need. And they actually prefer to squeeze through openings versus having an open door. An open door sometimes somewhat threatens them because too much airflow over their bodies, and they hear all these noises inside and so forth, and they don't want to be exposed to predators. Their behavior is to, if I can squeeze into something and my hairs get triggered a certain way, predators cannot squeeze behind me because it's too tiny, and my hairs tell me that, right? So, but this is a wide open door, 24/7, 365. You know, again, bait boxes are not going to prevent the issue here. And they should lose points, in my opinion. That's an open door. Whatever the points are, I'd be like, well, your door's open. You know, so here's a classic, typical one. This is a school door leading down a hallway, and off to the right is the school kitchen and cafeteria. But the school maintenance folks, like, yeah, we'll put up weather stripping and what have you. And even if these were good, which they're not, this is weather stripping, and weather stripping is not rodent proofing. Even if these were okay, at the very least, they would need to come and cover the astragal. This is called the astragal space. So wide open, you know, without belaboring the point, just wide open. So, you know, this is, if you read up on this, which is fascinating, I captured this mouse coming beneath a door. scenario. And what's very cool about this is, as I mentioned earlier, rats have these whiskers called vibrissae. And at the top of their head is vibrissae. And the ones at the top of the head, when they get bent over just at the right compression angle, like when you take a fishing rod and you bend it over, or you have a large fish on the line, you wonder, well, is this rod going to hold? Well, when those hairs get bent over to a certain degree, it triggers these animals to want to burrow or squeeze through things. And at that angle, when they get the right compression angle, they'll keep going, or they'll dig it out, or they'll back out. So this animal just loves doing this. So it has to be done correctly. So of course, in suburbia, to use a suburban development just like this, a generic suburban development, if we were to drive our cars at night, right before people are going to bed, let's say 10 o'clock at night, not in the daytime like this, and you just slowly drove that neighborhood, assuming a cop doesn't start following you, but if you slowly drove through this neighborhood and looked at all the attached garage doors, as you go by, just before people go, you will see the doors are down, but you can often see light leaks beneath those doors, light leaks. And if you could see light leaks, whatever house has light leaks, the mice, in this case, mostly it's going to be mice, the mice will go in it, right? So the door's down, but the door is not closed. That's the thing. And this becomes, you know, Mouseville in a blink over time. And then of course, everyone's going to, well, I got to find a good pest control professional to take care of this. Yes. And hopefully that good pest control professional will say, look, I'm going to mouse-proof your door. It's the smartest, best thing I could possibly offer you for long-term control of your mice versus putting out a bait box or a trap and showing up every month to resurface that trap. So that's vector control. That is total vector control. And there's no shortage of good information, you know, out there, right online, Extension Universities, Cornell, Purdue, Florida, I could go on and on, but no shortage of, it's not difficult to rotor-proof the ordinary house or building for that matter. I just took this picture a couple of weeks ago, you know, of course, right? But the magic foam, you know, PMP felt like, yeah, I'll help you out here, I'll mouse-proof your home. So thank you very much, thank you. There's no shortage of great materials now. I'm not with any company, I'm not promoting any company, but I just wanted to show you that this company probably, well, it was the first to actually come out with high-tech, truly pest-proofing correct material. You know, this company gets it, and they have many door products now and high technology. And so I can't recommend, if someone's going to pest-proof a door, it can't be weather stripped and it can't be done casually. It's not difficult to do, but it has to be done with the classic professionalism. Of course, right materials, right place, done, installed correctly. The second axiom I'd like to throw out, you know, is, you know, we all know is pest prevention is public health, of course, and prevention requires surveillance. Again, straight out of the textbook. If you're going to be involved with public health, everything's about surveillance, right? You know, disease tracebacks and all the etiology of a particular outbreak and so forth, but surveillance is where it's at. So these days, my biggest project that I'm involved with as a scientist and a consultant is using and employing the breakthrough in remote sensors over the past couple of years. And in New York City, we're doing this in a big way. We have a pilot going for the past couple of years, although the pandemic certainly set us back by a year and a half, but nevertheless, we're still doing this. And I find it a very exciting project. I see the future in it for all vector control professionals to be one of the most important breakthroughs that are going to happen for vector pest management. So what this involves, and I like to use the term canaries in the coal mine because that's what it is, right? We all know the concept of canaries in a coal mine, what it means in the old days for a canary to go down, and the miners would say, you know, well, we have a couple of canaries dead in the mine, and so everybody clear out, right? So here we have these sensors that can be used for monitoring, and just like the canaries in the coal mine, or just like anything else in public health, early detection, when we do have an invasion occur, say into a building or into an area or into a school or campus, I could go on and on, right? It's about public health, early detection and response. And we did not have this with the standard inspections of, as hard as everyone works, in New York City, we have some of the best inspectors day in, day out, going out and doing the foot surveys of, garbage, boroughs, the whole 9 yards as to, public health, mosquitoes, mosquito breeding, and stagnating water and pools and the whole bit, right? So we're always doing that. Well, with rodents now, we're moving ahead towards having the technologies finally caught up, and we have this little dude. You'll notice that this one, the one I'm working with at least, it's called an air sensor, and it's the size of a 1 rodent bait block. It's by a company, Corteva, who used to be Dow. Dow is the company, but this branch is the same branch that brings you Sentricon for termite control. So it's the same team, in fact. And so this particular sensor is unbelievably complex and unbelievably cool, and all the time it's getting even more sophisticated. So projects with the same concept of using these rodent sensors for what I call rodent smart city. Rodent smart city. Again, the rodents, they are certainly serious enough in all the East Coast cities, from Boston down to Eastern megalopolis, all the way to Washington, D.C., every one of those cities going down the line, from Boston straight down, we all have rats, and we all have significant numbers of rats. So we have to be data-driven on how we get a hold on this, in addition to all our other avenues, right? So basically, without going into this detail, but because you can do it yourselves offline, is the smart city concept. Every year they will have their winners and so forth, but it's very similar. And I think everybody knows a smart city, well, it's a smart city, right? But it mostly is called smart because it's hooked up to data analytics and sensors of all different sorts, as you can see here. And it's getting more complex with every single day, right? So what I'd like to add into this, what I fully intend, hopefully in my career to add to this, is that there'll be one of these pin drops will say vector management, rats, mosquitoes, ticks, whatever it may be. But for sure, these sensors, at least in my world, play a major role here in New York City right now in terms of our pilot. My office right now is right down here across the street from the Freedom Tower, which is now up and completed and what have you. I took this picture one day flying back from someplace before the Freedom Tower was actually up, but was under construction. So I'm down here. I'll be back tomorrow afternoon. I'll be right back there, going to the office and so forth. But I'm sure everyone attending this conference right now, you've been to Manhattan, you've been to New York City, but as far as you can see on Manhattan and across the Brooklyn Bridge to Brooklyn, rats are very severe. And I was born in Brooklyn over here. This is the Brooklyn Bridge. We think the rats arrived sometime in the late 1700s from Europe, right about here, with the original unloading dock for the early ships of the 1600s and 1700s. So this is the thing, right? This is how we see it. Putting out sensors, and it's gonna, probably for a city the size of New York or a Philadelphia or what have you, yes, there will be thousands of sensors, and it will be organized, and the data will be categorized and analyzed and so forth and so on. Of course. But how cool is that? Let's just say we know, for example, our sensors are really lighting up in a neighborhood over here on the east side, and previously there was no explanation for that. Well, we need to get a team together and get over there and see what is going on, what's happening here. Why are we getting all of a sudden hundreds, if not thousands of hits into an area? Was there some disruption to the sewer line or something was there a ship that came in, or who knows? But we will be able to, from our desks, and I could do it from my smartphone, I can just say, whoa, I got 22 alerts over here in my pilot sensors right now last night, and there's got to be a reason for that. So let's send out a team and intervene early. Intervene early. So, Again, this is it. This is the sensor. You can go online. In fact, there's multiple sensors out. I don't want to imply that this company has the only sensor. They don't. This is the one I chose to associate with and line up with. And, you know, just because of, in my opinion, the power of this particular one, right? But I think the future, you know, I was speaking with someone from Denmark yesterday here at the meeting. They're all over this kind of thing with their own sensors. So, but sensors are vector control tools that are going to be, in my opinion, I just say they're like the Uber. You know, they're like an Uber. It's the Uber of our road control business. So this is a base station, Bell Labs base station. It's the Evo Express. It's probably, I don't know. I know that it's probably the #1 base station I see throughout my entire travels everywhere I go. And so, what we have in some of our pilots in New York, we put the sensors inside those stations. And as the rats visit the stations, you don't have to have poison in there or a trap or anything. You could have a very attractive a bait, something that, you know, at least gives you a monitor. So perhaps they don't even have to interact with something they perceive as being dangerous, or you know, they're familiar with the detecting a poison or something like this. But it can be a surveillance station for vector management, right? No matter where you put it. So, or any station. So, you know, these stations, you know, I just took this right off the internet, of course. This is how it's used by pest professionals. They'll use rodenticides, and they will use traps, and or both, or one or the other, or just monitoring. No poison, perhaps, as we'll mention, you know, the issue there. So we don't need to spend time here, but essentially the sensor gets triggered. The sensors will send to the cloud, of course, you know, kind of thing. It reports to the cloud, it comes back down and reports to your cell phone, your super phone, or, you know, whatever it may be, or your tablet or desk computer, whatever. And you get the data, you get the exact location, the exact spot you put at the base station, what have you. And, you know, these sensors are just tremendous. Here's an old prototype we were working with. You know, I've been with this company since the very get-go of V1, and now, you know, they're way up there in terms of Vs and new technology and what have you, but it can be put into base stations, and the early V1s had to be connected to a trap, and if a rat or a mouse came in, accelerometer would be triggered and you get the alert that way. But that's changed with the new versions. So this is just that base station. This is a tremendous pest professional, Bob Hansen, and you know, who's just one of the best professionals I've ever been associated with. He's doing it for 35 years, Bob. And so we were out just taking some pictures, getting the job done. On your iPad or your tablet or what have you, you get a map. And each one of these greens, for example, with this particular warehouse, is a sensor, and it connects to a hub. And it will show you the location, and you can satellite this. They have their satellite. You can zoom in close, you can zoom back out, you can see entire neighborhoods and so forth. And now they have super hubs. I'm using one of these very soon in the next couple of weeks, where we can detect, in our case, almost all of Chinatown and the Lower East Side of New York City with one hub. And the map will show us our hundreds of sensors. And let's just say, like I pointed out earlier, which group of sensors have the most activity, or do they all have high activity, or some areas have no activity, so forth and so on. So pretty exciting stuff, you know, from where I'm sitting. You know, this is I use the iPhone. You know, most people, you know, and here, in fact, you're going to hear from Matt in a little bit, you know, but most people, you know, they get alerts on all kinds of things. Sometimes people get, you know, they're on alerts for sports, their favorite team won or lost or what have you. For me, you know, I want to see something that says, you know, something about rats. Hungry rats drag huge pretzel, you know, that kind of thing is like, cool. The next one right here is, you know, just a particular warehouse way out west where I set up a trial. And way out west, I'm getting to the exact bait station, you know, 4B, that tells me there was a mouse at door 4B in Utah, right? So because I'm involved with different projects and different pilots and what have you. which to me is just fun, to be honest with you, as well as exciting from a scientific point of view. My phone goes off in the middle of the night sometimes with a special beep that I associated with my alerts for the sensors. And, you know, my wife, who's very cool about this, she always, if we're asleep and my phone goes off, she always kind of says, hey, you know, you got one, kind of thing. And then she says, is the big one, a little one? She's like getting into it. 4 o'clock in the morning, she wants to know all about the rat I'm capturing. That's kind of I like to tell people that's our pillow talk, right? So, you know, just as an idea, you guys, for any city, again, any city for anybody that's here, I think the utility is, this is how we see it in our pilot. You know, who would not want to know whether there's lots of rats or mice at an airport number 7? Who would just forget vector ends of things, but you probably know rodents mean to chew. I don't want any rats and mice on my airplanes. I'll be on my airplane tomorrow. I'm always thinking about this because I've helped get rodents off of these commercial airlines. And, you know, they do chew on wires. So just that alone is an issue of, hey, you know, we can't have rodents in airports. We can't have them down because they're going to go lower. And where are they going to go? They're going to go into the loading dock areas, the baggage handling claims. From there, they're going to climb up the wheels and the support systems to the planes overnight while they're waiting to take out the first flight at 6 a.m. in the morning, and they're in. So I want sensors all throughout those lower zones of every single airport that I travel in. Of course, I want to know if, hey, there's rodents showing up down below and what's going on. And if I have an alert, say by gate 62, it's at some airport, and all of a sudden I have 17 alerts, you know, from the rider mounts bait stations that lead out to the outside, we need to get someone over there immediately. All right, so, but on this goes, including, by the way, one of the things we're working with, because I think everyone knows, rats are denizens of sewers, total denizens of sewers. And so we have to have systems. It's one of the heaviest, if not the #1 heaviest lift for a city, is what do we do about the rats in our sewers? I would love to see programs. If anyone has a program that, you know, we have found the following to be effective, truly effective, we've measured it before and after treatment, this kind of thing. I don't think it exists yet. Although technology is beginning to emerge, and interestingly, I was over in New Zealand a while back, and I met with a company that says, we're going after the rats in sewers, and we're developing technology that will both monitor them and trap them on a repeating basis. And they're working hard at that. And again, had it not been for the pandemic, they were headed to New York City. They offered to say, we will pilot with you guys in New York and see how it works in the New York system. But every one of these, all the way down here to, I know, number 13, require sensors. So we can have a smart city, whether it's a ship coming in at the seaport that may be carrying rodents from a country that, sadly, because this is how it went down, right? Maybe you're only as safe as one big container ship arriving in your city and unloading. And those rats perhaps carrying some pathogen from that country that's not here yet. Why would we not want to have top-notch preventive surveillance programs in such a scenario? So it's, to me, this is like no-brainer. So of course here, right, just what I just mentioned, all of this being unloaded, thousands and thousands of incoming, you know, week after week, month after month, year after year. This is how we all received the original rodents, and the two we're talking about in East Coast cities. They were from different parts of the world, and they came with ships. They weren't here in the East Coast before this. Of course, the airports, I always like to look at the pilot walkabouts. When I'm waiting for my plane, I look out the window and there's the pilot walking about, doing their due diligence with their flashlights and looking up, making sure at least they're not mechanics. But if they see something's, you know, there's a flap hanging down or a tire looks low, something like that, of course, they're gonna say, whoa, you know, we got a problem. Well, they're certainly not seeing into the interstitial space on the top end of this airline with bundles and bundles and bundles of wires that control everything, the flaps, the engines, the landing gear, blah, blah, blah. you know, the gauges, so forth and so on. One airline was fined $700,000 in fines for having rodent chewed wires. Just, you can get online and look that stuff up. I don't fly them, quite honestly, at all. In fact, I don't mind saying I fly Delta, it's my #1 choice. But, you know, you have to be careful. I worked with the subway guys going out at night in the middle of the night. We were on this team. This is like 2 a.m. in the morning when I took this picture. All of it, everybody in the orange jackets was rodent control. And at night, before the super sweeper trains, before new exclusion technology kept them out of the garbage rooms, rats were common on the trains in New York City, subways, but no longer because of exclusion. And we want to know prevention and sweeping sanitation. They have that done now. So parks, of course, parks, sitting down on a bench should not be a dangerous thing. You should sit down without having to worry about contacting with your fingers while you push off the bench, leptospirosis or something of that matter, and then you touch your face and so forth. It should not be a worry. Like it is here, this is exactly the way it was, exactly rat burrows right behind this bench. At night I went back, you know, there was rats, they run up and down these benches looking for scraps, they run down here, whatever people drop. The next morning there's a mom and dad, you know, a family sitting here having a day in the park lunch, oblivious to what's this, right? So that bench, in my opinion, should be taped off and said, you know, closed for under construction, whatever you want to say, but it should not be left open. So I'm just going to skip ahead here, you guys. And I want to, you know, show another major breakthrough. I'm just showing you here pictures of where sensors can go into rat land. You know, certainly an alley like that with all these dumpsters from all the restaurants, you definitely want sensors and those kinds of things, right? So you want them in the sewers. And to me, this is a major, major target of mine, is to do something for the sewers in terms of management before I retire. That's one of my goals. So what about rodenticides? Just an update here. The rodenticides, you probably all know all the different kinds of rodenticides. They're in trouble, to say the least. In fact, there's a meeting going on right now here in Las Vegas to address another conundrum of rodenticides are critically essential tools for rodent control, especially in cities. Make no mistake about it, rodenticides are public health tools. Right, we all know that. But someone took this picture of this beautiful red-tailed hawk. This is Central Park during the day, earning its living, so to speak. That rat's still alive, but not for very long. But now the Central Park Conservancy and many of the parks in New York City, rodenticides are not allowed. There are bans against all rodenticides in certain states, or significant bans. You know, and I just got notice just a couple of weeks ago, the entire British Columbia province in Canada, complete ban to see how it goes. European Union, they've been ahead of us for years with bans of rodenticides. So this is going to be difficult. You know, we're back to the days where there was big arguments and debates over DDT and its pluses and its minuses, and then Dursban, its pluses and minuses, Chlordane for termite control, plus and minuses. So here we are, no one saw this coming, no one saw the environmental drift. Everyone thought if you put the baits inside bait stations and nothing can get into the bait stations but rodents, they were, quote, safe except to rodents. But we didn't see the drift. And now we see it big time, big time. Many publications, if you get online, as to, you know, the secondary toxicity to hawks and owls and eagles. And let me just, hawks and owls and eagles. And yesterday I sat in a great session by Dr. Quinn at the University of California, and she was showing that coyotes out in California, for example, they're loaded with second generation anticoagulants in their systems, loaded. Well, that alone is an indicator, is like, whoa, how's that going down? What is the profile on that? Of which Dr. Quinn shared, we're not even sure yet how this is going, right? So we do know the future is going to be interesting, to say the least. As a result, over the past couple of years, we've shifted over to non-toxic materials. Rat Ice, Bell Laboratories was came out voluntarily. This was not a profit maker for them, trust me. They knew it would not be, but they came out as an environmentally ethical contribution, say, look, we're going to be the ones, take the course, take the data, support the label and what have you. And we were part of generating that label data for them and so forth. But rat ice is, as everyone knows, is, frozen carbon dioxide, putting dry ice into burrows at 2 pounds per burrow. If this is done right, it's over for those rats usually within 10 minutes. So I've done a whole bunch of rat ice treatments over the past several years, and I'm always amazed just how effective it is. But getting dry ice sometimes, depending on where it is, how far away it is for the applicator and so forth, can be a real pain, but still that's a very effective approach to go. Leafitech, one of the sponsors of this meeting also, they just, in the past month, received full clearance and purchasing of what's called the IGI carbon dioxide system with an eliminator. And, if you go online, you'll see Leafitech acquired all the assets for the inert gas injection system. And so we've been working with this in New York City very heavily. Again, it's my second busiest project, in addition to the sensors that I have going in the technical science end of things for DOH, New York City DOH, the second most each month. But I was just out the other day, literally, with technicians. We've been doing pilots throughout New York City. It's looking very, very promising. It's the same exact concept, if you will, of what you would get inside a restaurant that carbonates beverages. If you sit down and say, I'll have a Pepsi or a Coke or a 7-Up, and they go over to the machine and at the counter, it's going to be carbonated, just like this. Same kind of tanks, same size tanks, pressure gauges and so forth, injecting carbon dioxide into your carbonated drink. That's how it goes, right? So this is Chris Sayuro, tremendous guy I hang out with in New York City. We go out, we've been doing these pilots with the carbon dioxide all over the city under different circumstances, landscapes, parks, beneath sidewalks, into any areas where we know we can get a good hold on the gas. And even the areas where we know we can't get a good hold on the gas, we want to see if it has any impact on just the disturbance factor. But basically, at the right application, this takes about 3 minutes per burrow system to treat. And you can, with the tank and what have you, can get a couple hundred burrows done and so forth. And it's again, extremely promising. It's looking very good. And as I wrap up here, one of the benefits of the carbon dioxide breakthrough, which, especially if we have heavy restrictions on rodenticides, is that one of the benefits is not only do you take care of the rats in those burrow systems, but you take care of their ectoparasites, right? Their alarming bugs. And, Matt Fry, who, again, you're going to hear from, Dr. Fry, in just a little bit, is one of the experts in the published papers, Journal of Medical Entomology, what have you, on their alarming bugs, right? But nevertheless, when this guy, if you capture them in the wild, as Matt might elaborate on, and you comb these animals, you'll get a wide range of ectoparasites, the fleas and the mites and the ticks, what have you. You can read Matt's paper, kind of thing as to what he found in New York City rats, for example, but they're loaded in many, many cases. So the question I would ask the vector professionals, what dynamic is going on in close proximity to buildings with these ectoparasites? Is it they stay on the rats? Is there any movement whatsoever to dogs, over to dogs and cats when they come over here and they get close and some rats are dying and the ectoparasites are getting off the carcass and there's a dog nearby or a cat or even a human ankle or something like this? What is that dynamic? What's that all about? So the beauty of whether it's dry ice or cylinder dry, carbon dioxide, is we're getting the rats and their ectoparasites, which of course everybody knows themselves could be potential vectors. I myself have been in many cases in my career over the years where I've had these guys all over me by inadvertently putting my arm or crawling through something, crawl space, what have you, without realizing the tropical rat mite was just loaded in that particular colony. And they certainly bite, that's for sure, drive you crazy, when you get enough of them on you. And I should have been more careful in a couple of cases with my suits and coveralls, but oh well. You know, so these animals, yep, they're annoying. They scare people. They don't like them. But at the same time, they also have the little hitchhikers that, again, Matt will probably elaborate on. So I'm going to stop here. You know, that was a rush through a Zoom through a Zoom, right, if you will. But I do want to say thank you. I left a couple of minutes for questions. And as I mentioned to Emily, if we don't get your question answered, you can send it to me directly, either on Twitter. You can just find me on Twitter under Bobby Corrigan and send me a direct message, or you can send me an email with cityrats@mac.com. Okay, so I'll turn it over for questions if there are any.
All right, thanks, Bobby. We actually do have some questions. The first one is in the Q&A. It's from Chelsea. She asks, relating to leptospirosis surveillance, are the spirochetes detectable in wastewater? Could it be monitored via wastewater surveillance to determine the extent of local prevalence and trends to inform control priorities?
Well, it's a great question, Chelsea. And, you know, I don't want to go beyond my wheelhouse, to be honest with you. So I would think, and maybe someone else can answer this, but I would think they're detectable, you know, through the right surveillance techniques in wastewater, you know, but it's not something I feel, you know, qualified to go into any detail. So I would probably pass that on to the right epidemiologists and see what they come back with.
All right, and then there was a question sent in from one of our other speakers in the chat. Jeff asks, how do you determine the quantity or dosage of carbon dioxide in each treatment location? Is it done by timing the flow, weight of canister, gauge with amount injected? If the size of the burrow is unknown, how do you know how much carbon dioxide to use? As this will also determine the quantity in the canister as to how many applications you get per canister.
Yes, excellent, Jeff. So that's the key question. For the most part, Leafitech, and just like with the dry ice, which was worked out by a chemist at MIT, those application rates on a general scale can be determined, right? But on an exact scale, from time to time, the questions you raised, for example, we're still playing with those application rates. But for example, usually the gauges that are on there will show that you apply at 3 PSI, right? 3 PSI for 3 minutes for the typical Noye rat burrow system, which is the main entrance and 2 escape holes, which of course you're going to block all of that up. That's the typical application. Now from there, you have to do a little bit of, you know, professional interpretation of the burrow system and how many there are. I will say this, and in cases where it's difficult to get all the answers that, you know, you just asked, you know, those questions you just asked, we find when these burrow systems are more elaborate than we thought and probably extend further, you definitely will end up with second treatments and sometimes even third treatments for the tough situation, which is fine because that's the same exact scenario that goes down with baiting. As oftentimes, as you probably know, you have to do multiple baitings, you have to revisit, you have to reapply, so forth. So there's no difference here, but there is, you know, a difference of going back and retreating the burrows that at least reopen. And those become very, very visible. And certainly you want to use little garden flags and so forth to help you. But we are working on that dosage application, trying to tighten it up as best as possible with all our pilots right now in New York City, because that is the key group of questions that you just asked.
Hey, Bobby, I might just jump right in here. I don't think it's in your presentation, but do you have easily accessible your diagram of what a burrow system looks like? Is that easy to bring up or describe?
Yeah, so let me just, if we go back here, and I'm just going to back this up. All right, here's a burrow system right there, right? And so you'll see I have dry ice for burrows, and that diagram is actually out of the Mammals of Missouri by Schwartz and Schwartz. It's the representative based on research, good research that was done in California in the 60s, of one family unit for one burrow system. Typically contains a main entrance, 2 escape holes. It's 6 feet long. The burrow nest is equidistant to the escape and to the entrance, right? And so, which is 3 feet in, 3 feet out. Whenever I find a main entrance and I triangulate with my escape holes and I'm out in the field, I just step off 3 feet. Interesting, you can do this yourself. In the springtime, in April, May, June of the East Coast cities, if I can get to it, I jump up and down on top of that general area, just disturb like crazy. And a lot of times, right in the middle of the day, you can flush those rats right out. Now, you can't flush if there's any pups suckling and what have you. In fact, if jumping up and down, you may in fact crush them by doing that, but the adults run for their lives in this case. But that's your typical burrow system right there. Now, of course, when you have many burrows, you have to do the best you can in identifying your main entrances and close up your escape holes, treat, and then go back the next day or the next couple of days and see what burrows are reopened, and those are targeted for retreatment. Do the same thing with baiting, same thing with dry ice, and you keep retreating until problem is solved. Again, it is no different, and in many cases, less work in the long run than it is to constantly doing the baiting, not to mention all the elimination of the secondary threat, the hawks and the owls and the non-targets of that area, and the ectoparasites.
Great, thank you.
All right, and we do have some more minutes in our presentation time. If there's any more questions from the audience, please feel free to use the Q&A. All right, well, if there's no other questions, thank you very much, Bobby, and we will go ahead and move on with our agenda for the day.
All right, thanks again, Emily.
And at this time, I will be launching our first poll of today's session. So again, if you are seeking pesticide certification credits from today's event, please do take a moment to complete this poll. It will be available for 5 minutes. And while that's launched, we can go ahead and transition to our next speaker. I'm introducing Tricia Schellenberger, who will be representing Bell Laboratories. Tricia, when you're ready, please go ahead and start your presentation.
All right, good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for being here. It's hard to follow Dr. Corrigan, but he did an amazing job talking about rodents and making it interesting. I am relatively new with Bell. I started right before COVID, so I got to meet you guys once before. I am the Mid-Atlantic sales rep for Bell Labs, so anything that you guys need across PA, let me know. We're known for our bait stations as well as the baits that are out there. And then we also do have the rodent monitoring system that ours is Bluetooth based. That's also an alternative when you're looking for some rodent monitoring out there. But we have all different types of actives, as Dr. Bobby Corrigan said. It's one to where there's different actives for different means. And we even have detects so that you can actually just try to get proof of presence when it comes to rodents before you actually physically go out there and use baits. But this is something that if you guys need anything out there throughout the year, here's my contact information. We have a lot of great products and I look forward to meeting with you guys in the future in person. And I can also come out and do some trainings for you guys, or if you need an extra set of eyes as an inspection out in the field, this is something that I'm more than happy to come out and help you guys out in the field and be an extra set of eyes and lend any type of information that I could possibly give you guys. But thanks again for all your support and everything that you guys do for us out there in the field. But thank you guys again. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Our next presenter today is Dr. Matt Fry, who will be presenting on municipal rodent control. Matt, when you're ready, please go ahead and start your presentation.
Right. You can see that okay?
Yep, it looks great.
Excellent. Well, thank you, Ray, for the opportunity to speak to the group today. And thank you, Bobby, for an excellent presentation on municipal rodent management and city rat control. I'm going to take a little bit of a different approach today. There'll definitely be some overlap, but my talk today is really talking about the challenges and opportunities in municipal rodent IPM. So I'll get started here by kind of setting the stage with the fact that cities have for a long time been dealing with rats and rat infestations. The rat that we're dealing with in the Northeast, we typically call the Norway rat, is also called the brown rat. And you may not be aware of its origin. So the name Norway rat can be confusing. You may think that it comes from Norway. In fact, this animal evolved in northern Asia, specifically Mongolia and northern China. And from there, it spread to Southeast Asia and was taken on trade routes as well as coastal routes to all parts of Europe. So by, I think, around the 18th century, 1700s, it had spread all the way to Europe and throughout the European continents. So after it arrived in Europe is when it really started to spread from transport out of Europe. It spread to all coastal cities, including New York. And it's predicted that the Norway rat population arrived in New York between 1750 and 1780. And the interesting thing about this, which has been recently investigated by folks at Fordham University, is that the genetic structure of the rats that are currently found in New York City is this same group that originally arrived to the city in the 1750s, 1780s. So this is suggesting that the rats arrived on a ship from Europe, and they established their populations and have since precluded other rats from establishing in that territory. One of the other reasons this could be is that the ports that now receive shipments in the New York area go to New Jersey. And so new introductions could have occurred in that area. But primarily, these introductions have been stopped by the presence of current rat populations. So especially in the Northeast, we have a long history of cities that are dealing with rat populations. I'll reiterate some of the points that Bobby mentioned as to why we are so concerned with rats, not just in municipalities, but also in suburban and rural areas. In particular, they cause structural damage that can be significant for buildings. The image on the left shows some wires in a subway system that have been chewed by rats, but it's actually estimated that 25% of fires that are attributed to an unknown cause are due to rodents gnawing on wires in walls. There's a number of reasons why they may do this, thinking that perhaps these are vines or other features of a natural environment, and they think there may be food sources or water inside. It could also be their proclivity for gnawing. So in either case, they chew on these wires, can expose them. They can be killed by this process, but they can also cause things such as fires. Bobby talked at length about contamination issues and the current situation with leptospirosis, as well as other foodborne pathogens. Rodents will defecate in areas where they're feeding or walking. They'll urinate. They can transmit pathogens through bites, and bites are known to occur, especially in infants and the elderly that may go to sleep with food residue on their body, on their face and hands. And as Bobby mentioned, there's always the concern of ectoparasites that are housed on the bodies of rodents and that can leave if they've been, if the rodent has been killed, or as their life cycle, they jump off the animal and looking for a new source of food. So certainly the risk of contamination and transfer of pathogens. They can cause property damage. The image center on the right is from rodent burrowing in a soil area, a landscaped area in a municipality. And through their excavation of the soil, they've damaged the roots of these plants, subsequently killing those plantings. So obviously this would be a replacement cost for the municipality. And then finally, whether it's someone's home or if it's a restaurant or a food establishment, there's certainly aesthetics associated with finding dead rodents that people do not particularly want. So there's aesthetic issues and potential loss of business due to the presence of rodents. One of the real interesting things that have come out from recent literature, both out of British Columbia and in the city of Chicago, is documented impacts that extend beyond the damage that we're typically considering when it comes to rodents. So not just gnawing and excavating and pathogens, but a number of psychological issues that are a result of living with, in, or around rodent populations. So things such as fear, anger of having to live in an environment with rodents, stress, worry, exhaustion. If you're up at night and you can't sleep because you're living in an environment with rodents, they're disturbing your sleep. And even things like avoidance behaviors, where people that would have in the past enjoyed their backyard or enjoyed a community garden have to avoid those areas because of encounters with rats. So this was particularly pronounced during the COVID-19 pandemic, when people were at home and in isolation. They could have been exposed to those rodent populations even more than before. And the places that they might have gone in the past, like their backyard or a community garden, now they're being faced with rodents in those situations as well. So it's certainly interesting to extend the concerns about rodents to not just the damage, but also the psychological effects. As Bobby mentioned, across the United States, for sure, there's been an increase in the reports of rodents. Pest management companies have indicated an increase in rodent related requests. In 2021, many of those requests were new business. So people that had never required rodent management before were dealing with mice and rats, especially rats. And so they hired a contractor to help manage those problems. Part of that is due to the changes that we observed during the pandemic and shutdowns, is that food sources changed. Areas that had predictable food sources in the past, like restaurant refuse and back alleys, that might have decreased at the beginning stages of shutdown when no food was being produced and no waste was being generated. And so as a result, the ideal harborage changed, where people may have been cooking at home. And so now the rats want to be closer to residential settings compared to commercial settings in the past. The interesting example to take away from this is just how influential people are in rodent populations. And I think, as we look back on shutdowns from the COVID-19 pandemic, it's a really informative lesson that we didn't learn anything from. Once things started to open, everybody went back to business as normal. And we didn't really take into consideration how our behaviors affected those rodent populations and how we could have changed our behaviors to reduce our interactions with these pests. So hopefully there'll be some reckoning of that, but it doesn't seem likely at this point. So in terms of municipalities, and you'll have to forgive me for my stock photo use here, but we have different levels of rodent IPM that occurs in municipalities. And this is something that the agencies that manage rats, especially in these municipalities, have to contend with. Rat problems can occur at the individual level, where they're in one person's home, one person's apartment. They can also occur at the group level, where we're thinking about rat problems infesting an entire building or a condominium complex, for example. And in those two cases, the management of rodents is either taken on by the individual themselves in their own space, in their own home, or performed by a hired pest professional. Alternatively, when it comes to the larger scale and the public spaces, including things like parks and transportation, public buildings, as well as the neighborhood level, that management of rodents comes down to the municipality. So there's always a question, and different municipalities answer this question differently. Who owns that rat problem? If we're talking about one building or one apartment in this building, perhaps this one floor, who owns that rat problem? Is it the resident that lives in that space? Is it the landlord that owns that building? Is it the city that the building resides in? And so it's even further complicated because in this one building alone, we'll take this gray and brick building, for example. Maybe on this bottom floor, we have a food servicing establishment, a restaurant, a deli. That may be managed by one pest management company, whereas the rest of the building, in terms of the apartments, is managed by a separate company. And a third company could manage the base building, things like underground parts or common areas. So there's complication for municipal rodent management in terms of who is managing the rats in what space and what is the impact of that management on the rest of the building, the rest of the neighborhood. So in general, municipal rodent IPM occurs in city-owned buildings, transportation hubs, abandoned lots, sewers, and parks. For the most part, it is management of rats in public spaces, although in some cases, municipalities will manage mice, especially if they're called to a situation where a homeowner or a commercial tenant indicates that they have rats, but it's actually mice. Ideally, these programs are proactive, and they would rely on monitoring and environmental management, such as addressing the sanitation issues that Bobby mentioned. This obviously is the ideal, but in reality, programs are reactive. It's the very nature of these large municipal programs that they're overwhelming, and that there's not enough funding or staff to manage the problems proactively. So by nature, they're reactive. They're responding to complaints. In some cases where there have been developed systems, they are able to do proactive inspections, but at the very least, one component of the program will be to react. In these settings, the rats are viewed as the problem itself, but we know from listening to Bobby that they are a symptom of the issues. They're a symptom of the sanitation problem, like the one you see here, where refuse is put out at the peak time for rodents to start feeding, which is in the dusk, and it's maybe left out all night until the morning when rats are feeding during that entire time. So the behaviors of people and the policies around things like sanitation are what provide the food, water, and shelter to sustain these rat populations. Interestingly, in terms of municipal rodent IPM programs, there was investment at the federal and state level before the 1980s. So the CDC would advise cities on rodent management. They had staff that were able to potentially assess issues and help in the management of these programs. But unfortunately, with funding cuts and expertise being moved to private sector, a lot of that support in municipal settings faded beginning in the 80s and until about early 2000s. And in recent years, there has been sort of a revitalization of an interest in municipal rodent control and new resources being generated that address some of the challenges and opportunities in municipal rodent management. So there's a few papers that have come out recently about perspectives on development and implementation of municipal rat management. There's several projects throughout North America, the Boston Urban Rat Study, the Chicago Rat Project, Vancouver Rat Project, all of these looking at a system-wide management program for municipalities with the hope that the information generated in these studies can be translated to smaller municipalities that may have even fewer resources to address the problems. Of course, we have a great chapter in Bobby's book, Municipal Rodent Control Programs, that outlines many of the topics that are discussed in the literature today. And these are just expansions of Bobby's comments and critiques. So one of the interesting thoughts that has come out of this is that although rats in Bobby's megalopolis are a problem in all of the cities in the Northeast, for example. There hasn't been any communication between the various cities to understand what each municipality is doing to control rodents and what are program successes, what are failures, how are these being measured. Part of the reason for that is that the different municipalities have challenges that are unique to their own city. So if you visited Philadelphia, if you visited New York, you know that on a visual aspect alone, the cities are very different in terms of how they're distributed, what the housing looks like, what the types of buildings are. So there's differences inherent to the city, but we're all trying to address this issue of managing rats on a large scale. So with insight from Ray Delaney and his conversations with Bobby, this past year, we formed a municipal rodent IPM working group. And this group includes municipal rodent managers from various municipalities in the Northeast, as well as other major cities in the US and Canada, industry representatives, including consultants, manufacturers, and pesticide applicators, as well as academics. And the real goal of this working group is to facilitate that communication between the various municipalities to start a dialogue and understand what have been program successes, what are the challenges and opportunities. One of the important goals is to advance the adoption of rodent IPM in these cities. And this would take place not just at the level of people that are performing the rodent pest management, but also an education of the politicians and decision makers about what is effective rodent management at the scale of a municipality. We'll be identifying research needs that are gaps in our understanding of rodent management. Bobby mentioned the importance of sewer rats and us not really having an understanding of how rodent populations are behaving in sewers and how we can manage them in those settings. So certainly there are a number of research needs that need to be addressed before we can move towards this larger adoption of municipal rodent IPM. And certainly continue to identify challenges and opportunities in municipal rodent IPM. So if you're interested in reading a little bit more about this effort, there's a website on the Northeast IPM Center's main page. If you go to working groups, you can find this. On that website, there are notes from our first meeting, which took place in June. And those notes really outline some of the major components of the various municipalities' rodent control programs. In that session, we heard from Boston, from New York City, from Philadelphia, from Washington, DC, New Orleans, and I believe that was it. So several different cities with different approaches to rodent management. The current approaches that many of them are taking include the inspections. Sometimes they are proactive. Most times they are reactive, responding to resident complaints. They all have some level of an educational campaign that is in multiple languages to address the residents of their particular cities. Some of the municipalities have a workforce that provides pest management for the city. So they have contracted pest, or they have pest professionals that work for the city that provide pest management. And the basis of much of the enforcement to address the rodent problems in specific areas are codes that result in fines for individuals that are not complying with refuse management or addressing a rodent problem in a certain amount of time. There may be liens. There's some opportunities to put violations on someone's taxes so that they don't get out of paying the fine for a violation of a rodent management issue. The most common practices that are used, as you might expect, include burrow baiting. This is obviously the goal to directly target rats where they are nesting and hopefully manage the population. Certainly advancements with carbon dioxide, whether it's dry ice or the new systems, would definitely benefit this type of approach. The main reason that burrow baiting is used is because it's quick, easy, and cheap. So another system that would replace that, that's faster and cheaper, would be terrific. Many municipalities also do sewer or basin baiting. There are different regulations. For example, in New York, this is not allowed because of potential contamination of water sources. But other municipalities are still allowed to do sewer and basin baiting to manage rodent problems in those settings. But there's a huge variety of rodent IPM practices that are available to cities. So not just rodenticide baits, the tracking powders, there's trapping, there's the carbon monoxide, which is using a different device to pump carbon monoxide into burrows, carbon dioxide, which is the rat ice, as well as the new Leaf-Attack product. There's also birth control, rat hunting dogs, the digital and remote monitoring that Bobby mentioned, pest exclusion, and sanitation. So part of the working group is going to be looking at how these different components are being used in cities and which practices are showing promise for managing rats at that scale. So far, again, some of the things that have been shown to work in terms of these programs are the proactive inspections. New York City has a very detailed plan set up in part by Bobby to make sure that inspections are proactive and to identify active rodent signs in neighborhoods throughout Manhattan. Interagency cooperation and centralized reporting has worked for some municipalities where parks, sanitation, the various utilities, whether it's the water department or others, schools and streets, when all of these groups work together and are trying to address the rat problem together, there's a greater success than if just one agency is trying to manage the rat problem. Specific ordinances we mentioned, data collection to inform management areas. So again, in New York, the information is collected by inspectors, and then that information is used to make decisions about where management should occur. This is more proactive than just responding to resident complaints and can help to address some of the long-standing problems and some of the reservoirs for rat problems in urban areas. Some cities have stoppage teams, including Philadelphia and New York. And these are teams that go out and perform some level of pest exclusion. So they'll bring the appropriate tools to a site to help keep rats out of a building. Changes in policies so that refuse is less available to rodents, including evening trash pickup in New York City parks, has demonstrated an effect to potentially reduce the numbers of rats that are a problem in that area. And then, of course, public engagement. So working with the public to help them understand what are the causes of the rat problem and what they can do as individuals to help mitigate those issues. So I'll sort of wrap up here in the last couple of slides by talking about some of the challenges and opportunities that we've already addressed as a working group, but we'll further discuss in the next 2 weeks for municipal rodent management. One of the greatest challenges is that there's really no effective surveillance tools and techniques for urban areas. We have our inspectors that go out and monitor for active rodent signs, but are there tools that are easier to use and over a greater scale that can help understand, where are rodents distributed, what are the numbers of rodents in cities, to help have some kind of measure on what are management techniques doing to reduce those issues. So development of surveillance tools and techniques. As I just mentioned, evaluation. So if there's no way to quantify the number of rats in an area, how are we evaluating the success of these programs? There's been a lack of consistent and robust evaluation tools available for municipalities. In some cases, they may be counting the number of active burrows in a particular park. That's a useful metric for that one site, but it may not be an evaluation of the entire municipality. Looking at numbers killed is a challenge because it doesn't reflect how many are being born and what the overall population is. As Bobby mentioned, regulations are continuing to change. California passed legislation last year to ban most uses of second-generation anticoagulants, and British Columbia as well has an 18-month ban to determine what the impacts will be. Being a resident of New York, many pesticide legislation acts that come through from California make their way to New York. And so I think it's probably a matter of time before there's advocates that are pushing again for a ban of rodenticides in New York. So this certainly makes a huge challenge for managing rodents in urban areas if they are to remove these products without further evaluation. One of the challenges for municipalities is that there's not often a strategic plan for rodent management programs. When we compare other programs like solid waste management or transportation, cities have strategic plans in place. But in terms of rodent management, oftentimes those strategic plans are lacking. So there's no identified goals, there's no identified objectives, it's just manage the rodents. So having strategic plans in place can help to set standards for what the group should achieve and how we can get there. Of course, one of the challenges that we mentioned is the behavior of residents. This is a great illustration of that by having a big belly trash can that's intended to remove food sources for rats. Garbage goes into these devices and they are relatively rodent proof. A rat can't get in there, but that's only as good as long as the trash gets in there. So putting trash bags on the side does not utilize this device. So changing behaviors to ensure that people are participating in managing the food items that are available to rodents is a critical step. Bobby mentioned, infrastructure with his great image of sewers and a rat poking out. This is a really clean crawl space in a building. But the point is that in municipalities, there's different ages of infrastructure. In buildings that have been around for a long time, that infrastructure has layer upon layer of pipes and open-ended pipes and other unused, uncapped sources for rats to move from one location to another. So it's really important that we have some ability to assess that infrastructure and manage rat problems in those areas. And then from recent research out of British Columbia, this idea of the unit of management for rodent control is a novel concept. So populations are not just focused in the one person's apartment or the one building. Populations can extend to be 1 block or 2 blocks. And so if we are only managing rats in one building on 1 block, we can quickly see the population bounce back when individuals from the same population repopulate it. And this image is trying to highlight those different populations. So this gray color, for example, represents one population, one genetic population. And this gray circles over here is the same genetic population. So these may be isolated, but all of these are connected. If we remove rats from this 1 block, they can quickly be replaced by the same population in neighboring blocks. So it's important to understand that management has to occur at a larger level than just individual locations if we're going to address the larger problem. There's certainly an opportunity for collaboration between municipalities and the professional pest management industry, for example. Pest management professionals have a unique experience of working in different settings for long periods of time. And so they have great experience to understand rat management tactics. And so there could be coordinated efforts for pest professionals to manage rats at one level and the municipality to manage rats at different level. Pest professionals and municipalities can work together as partners to address research questions. This has been one of the major limitations for studying rats in today's cities. Once a problem is identified, the municipality or the pest professional want to immediately eliminate that rat population, but researchers need those populations to study the dynamics of what's happening. So this difficulty has limited the opportunities to study rats in urban areas, but there could be opportunities for collaboration. And certainly pest professionals could be contractors for municipalities in challenging situations. Other opportunities are to improve our sanitation and our environmental management of rats. So Bobby pointed out that these garbage cans with open lids are great for people. They're very easy, but they're also accessible to rats. So if we invest more money in the long term and buy devices that are rat proof, then we minimize the amount of food resources that are made available to urban rats. Bobby mentioned exclusion. This is just one opening of a door. Bobby showed some other great ones. We've known since the 40s that we should be excluding rodents from our buildings. There's great resources dating back to that era of keeping rats out of structures. But unfortunately, that message is lost because baiting is so much easier than selecting the right materials and implementing pest exclusion. So we need to revisit this as individuals, as pest professionals, and as municipalities to make sure that our structures are resistant to rats. There are opportunities to use different materials in situations like parks, where they may house the majority of rats that are burrowing and then foraging to other areas. There's stainless steel woven fibers that can be used as these barriers to burrowing. They are extremely expensive, and so alternatives would include things like sharp 1-inch diameter stone that can be laid down in areas to deter rats from burrowing. So again, just incorporating exclusion into the municipal framework to reduce habitat for rats. And then I'll wrap up with this comment from Colvin and Jackson, who indicated that the future of urban rodent control is not limited by science and technology. We pointed out all the different ways that rats can be managed, and there's new and exciting management techniques and monitoring on the horizon. Instead, it is limited by politics and bureaucracies. So they point out, as well as other authors have pointed out, that the greatest challenge in municipal rodent management is the cyclic nature of management efforts. One mayor may decide that rats are an important part of their campaign, and so hope to deliver on that message by implementing rat management protocols and programs. But the next mayor may decide that it's not as important to them. The previous mayor did a good job, and so funding is stripped away. And these cyclic funding cycles really make it challenging to implement long-term effective monitoring and management programs. So certainly something for us to consider as we move forward is how can we get buy-in from politics and bureaucrats on having long-term management programs in place. And with that, I'd like to thank you for your time and hope this was a little bit different but informative in terms of how municipal programs work. Thanks.
Thank you, Matt. It looks like we do have a question for you in the Q&A. Richard asks, how long do rats live? Oh, I think you're muted.
Yes, sorry. In the field, rats will probably live less than a year. There's environmental conditions that will affect how long they're able to survive and obtain food. There's, not predation from really hawks are not really a concern in municipalities, but certainly competition from other rats can reduce their lifespan. In captivity, rats can live much longer. So it's not a question of them not being able to survive more than a year, but it's typically that they are not able to find enough resources or compete with others to live longer than a year.
All right, thank you. If there are other questions from the community, please feel free to use the Q&A. All right, well, thank you very much, Matt, for your great presentation. At this time, I will be giving a brief presentation on some training opportunities that are available through the Cornell Department of Entomology and the eCornell online training program. The first of these is a vector-borne disease surveillance course. This 3-week online course lasts about 5 to 7 hours per week in terms of your total effort, and it is designed to cover the tools, methodology, and best practices for surveillance of ticks, mosquitoes, and other arthropods. And it is designed for people who work in public health, vector control, sanitarians, environmental health, and other related professions. This course is taught by Dr. Laura Harrington, who's a professor of entomology at Cornell University, as well as by Dr. Sarah Michaels, who is an associate professor at Tulane. The second course offered by eCornell and the Cornell Department of Entomology is the biology of mosquitoes, ticks, and other disease-causing arthropods. This 4-week online course is also about 5 to 7 hours per week in terms of your effort as a student. The content covers the biology, behaviors, and disease transmission processes of a range of organisms, highlighting those arthropods that transmit disease to humans globally, but also specifically in the United States. This course is designed for a broad audience, so that includes public health, vector control, and environmental health, but also medical providers, veterinarians, and students of medical entomology broadly. This course is taught by Dr. Lori Harrington at the Cornell Department of Entomology. These courses are $3.99 each to enroll, but members of regional vector control associations like the Pennsylvania Vector Control Association are eligible for discounts. And there are also some upcoming specials related to AMCA's conference as well as the new year. So please do reach out to the course operators if you're interested in learning more about these opportunities. I have produced on the slide the upcoming schedules for when each of these courses will be offered in 2022, as well as short links where you can access the Cornell course pages. But again, you can simply Google eCornell vector-borne disease courses, and these should come up in your search history.
Okay. So I'm going to talk about reading labels, label literacy. And I know that this is a pretty basic concept for a lot of us. So most of it's going to be a review. I'm going to go through a lot of slides pretty quickly. However, there are a few points that are salient that I'll hit on. I do want to point out too that I work for Penn State University. I'm not trying to sell anybody anything. Products, vendors, or commercial services mentioned or pictured in the trainings or presentations are for illustrative purposes only and are not meant to be endorsements. Medical concerns must be addressed by a medical professional. And of course, please do not take legal action based on anything that I say. Consult an actual lawyer. So this is about label literacy, and it was actually, the presentation was put together by Ed Crow, who many of you may know. He literally wrote the book, and it's very comprehensive. And this is an excellent training tool for new staff as well. If you're interested in the slides, please contact me. So pesticides are fairly unique because most legislation and regulation is designed to keep hazardous materials out of the environment. And the Federal Insecticide, Fungicide, and Rodenticide Act, FIFRA, is one of the very few federal laws that legally allows the introduction of a hazardous material into the environment. So what are pesticides? Any substance, used to control, prevent, destroy, repel, or mitigate a pest. And these, of course, include insecticides, herbicides, fungicides, rodenticides, repellents, growth regulators, disinfectants, and more. And many people do not realize this. They don't think of herbicides as a pesticide. If you ask people if they use pesticides, they may indignantly proclaim, no, I don't use pesticides. But if you ask them if they use Roundup, yes. If they use Raid, yes. If they use foggers, yes. And so there's really very poor public understanding of the extent of pesticides. All pesticides sold in the United States must be registered with the EPA, except for those classified as minimum risk pesticides under Section 25B. And labels must be submitted to the EPA for registering. And there are many conditions that on how labels are put together. There is an EPA developed label review manual, which I'm sure our industry partners are excessively familiar with. And basically all pesticides are classed as either restricted use or general use, non-classified. And training and certification of pesticide applicators is based on the need for restricted use pesticides to be applied by trained applicators. And restricted use pesticides are the highest category of pesticides. That is, that they may harm humans or the environment, even when used according to label restrictions. And these pesticides may theoretically only be purchased and applied or used by a certified applicator or someone under their direct supervision. In the age of the internet, these restrictions have become a little leaky. General use or non-classified pesticides are not likely to harm humans or the environment when used according to label instructions. And these may be purchased and applied by anyone, especially these days. There is a category of pesticides that's very popular these days, which are the minimum risk pesticides under Section 25B. And that section lists 44 active ingredients that are considered minimum risk. These include things like mint and other essential oils, citric acid, citronella, and they are exempted from EPA registration. However, to qualify as a 25B, both the active and inert ingredients must be on a specific list of exempted ingredients. They also cannot claim to control health-related pests. So, yeah. And here in Pennsylvania, all products, 25B products, must be registered with the Pennsylvania Department of Agriculture. And there are state variations, some of which will be noted, and as particularly as to whether Pennsylvania requires or allow, or does not allow a particular exemption. So using a pesticide begins with the label, and the key function of the label is to manage potential risks. And we're going to go over it in excruciating detail. So lots of reasons why people don't read labels. And in fact, the EPA knows that only about 20% of people bother reading labels, which means if they're not reading the label, they're probably not applying the pesticide correctly, which means it is a misapplication. And unfortunately, this also includes professionals. The pesticide label does have answers to basically all of your questions about the use of a product. Is it the right chemical? Where can I apply it? Does it control the particular pest problem I have? And what are the conditions to apply it correctly? Do I have the proper protective equipment? How much of the product do I use? And it's important to realize that these pesticide labels are legal documents, and the pesticide applicators are required by both the federal and state law to use pesticides in accordance with the label directions. The label label is the law. And as it says on every container, it is a violation of federal law to use this product in a manner inconsistent with its labeling. Section 2EE of FIFRA has provisions that allow the use of a pesticide different from the label instructions for the following. In most cases, target pest does not have to be listed. Rodenticides are the exception. Any application method may be used unless prohibited on the label. Applications can be made at a rate less than indicated on the label, but never at a higher rate. And in general, pesticides could be mixed with the fertilizer unless prohibited by the label. However, the site or crop that the pesticide is to be used on must be on the label. And here in Pennsylvania, we do recognize these provisions. Okay, so the label is the things that are written, printed, or attached to the pesticide container. Labeling is the label and all other written, printed, or graphic material attached to the container or referenced on the label or on attachments. And that includes the booklets, applicator manuals, okay, websites. All right, you may need to cross-reference, for instance, to find out about environmental endangered species protections. And by law, pesticide labels must include a lot of information, okay? Trade name, use classification, type, ingredients, EPA registration and establishment numbers, signal words, first aid, precautionary statements, environmental hazards, directions for use, storage and disposal, manufacturer information, and the contents, of course. However, most of this information is not highly determined in placement. The front panel must include, more or less in this order, a restricted use pesticide statement, if it is, the product name and trade name, the ingredient statement, keep out of reach of children, the signal word, first aid for category 1 products, and skull and crossbones symbol in the word poison, if it is that level, and the net contents. Other information can appear either on the front or back of the label. That includes the EPA registration and establishment numbers, the company name and address, and a mode of action numerical symbol when used that way, if that's used. Trade names are used by companies to market the product. Different trade names may include the same active ingredient. Trade names often include the type of formulation and the percentage of active ingredient. Okay, so here we have 75% of a wettable soluble powder. The ingredient statement must list the active ingredients and the percentage found in each product. It will also list the chemical name of the active ingredient. So here, the active ingredient has the common name of fipronil, and then there's the long chemical name as well. And the trade name Termidor also appears here. So we have the trade name Termidor, the common name fipronil, and the chemical name 5-amino, etc., all in one place. Inert ingredients are usually not named, often listed only as other ingredients or as inert ingredients. And inerts are not presumed to have any insecticidal activity. Again, that's a little dubious because PBO, for instance, is considered an inert, but also has demonstrated insecticidal activity. And the label also needs to show the percentage of the total contents. Chemical name is a complex name. It identifies the chemical components and structure of the active ingredient, and it will be listed. And because of the complexity, many chemicals are given a short common name only common names officially accepted by the EPA may be used on an ingredient statement on the label. Fipronil being a good example of that. The amount of active ingredient contained in the pesticide is also listed on the label. So underneath these statements, so here, we're still looking at that fipronil label, 1 gallon of Termidor SC termiticide contains 0.8 pounds of fipronil. Application sites are important. The label will list sites where the product can be used. And in order to use a product, the site or crop must be listed on the label. So here we have for indoor and outdoor use, sorry, I have to shift this over here. For indoor, outdoor control of ants, crickets, and roaches for use in and around structures and residential areas. Pretty broad site list. In the case of rodenticides, the label must also list the target animal that it can be used to control. Okay, so only these rodents may be controlled with this product. The APA registration number is required on all pesticide labels except for 25B products, and it is not an endorsement by the EPA, but simply indicates the product has been reviewed and registered and the label approved. And yeah, we see examples sometimes of products that do try to equate an EPA registration with endorsement. So here we have the EPA registration number. I'm sure most of us are very familiar with these numbers. They are an essential part of our job. I will point out here that poison control centers are also an important part of a pesticide applicator's knowledge. In the case of human or environmental human exposure in particular, the first thing you should do before calling 911 is to call your local poison control center. And there is one number nationwide, which everybody should have in their cell phones, 1-800-222-1222. This is a national network with local call centers. So here in Philadelphia, it rings at the Children's Hospital of Pennsylvania. The most important piece of information to have when you call is the EPA registration number. They do clear 95% of their calls over the phone, so no need to go to the doctor or the ER. If the toxicologist at the other end thinks it's important, they will call and brief the EMT and send them for you. I will also point out this is for human exposure, not for pets. The SPCA does have an animal poison control center phone number, and this probably is also a useful number for most of us to have in our cell phones, 888-426-4435. So distributor labels are used when a product is manufactured by one company, but relabeled and distributed by another. And they basically are the same except for as the parent companies, except for the product name, the company label. And on the EPA registration label, a third set of numbers is added that refers specifically to this distributor. So here we have the regular EPA reg number, and then this would be the distributor. Just back that up 1 second here, because it's very small down in the bottom here. You can see that products that are classified as minimum risk are exempted from EPA registration. EPA establishment numbers must also be present, and they identify the facility that produced the product, which is useful if there are recalls. So here we have 2 establishments that may manufacture this product, either in Rhode Island or Illinois. And the batch codes will usually identify which facility it is. Signal words are another piece that I think most of us understand, and include humans and animals. Need to appear in large letters on the front of the panel.
Hi, Diane. I'm afraid that your internet connection has timed out a little bit. Perhaps you can turn off your video and that might increase the bandwidth.
Apologize for that.
Oh, I'm afraid their share screen turned off when you turned off your video.
The joys of Zoom. Can everybody hear me?
Yeah, you're coming through better now.
Okay, great. Sorry about that. So signal words must appear in large letters on the front panel of the label, along with the statement, "Keep out of reach of children." And now my slides are not advancing. There you go. Signal words are based on testing, both on feeding tests and on dermal tests performed on animals. And basically here, if it's very slightly toxic, like it's going to need basically a pint or more to have a 50-50 shot of killing something, it gets a caution label. If it's has a chance of about a tablespoon being a toxic dose, it will get a warning label. And if it's a teaspoon, it will get a danger label. And if it's highly corrosive, it will also get a danger label. Something that's highly toxic, that is requiring less than a teaspoon or sometimes as little as a taste, will get a danger poison with the skull and crossbones. And that word poison must appear in red, and these products are extremely lethal and can cause death in very, very low doses. The word danger signals the product is highly toxic by at least one route of exposure, can cause permanent damage or permanent or severe damage to skin, eyes, or lungs. Warning signals that a product is moderately toxic through any of the rates of exposure and can cause moderate and reversible damage. Caution signals the product is slightly toxic and can cause mild irritation. Very low toxicity pesticides are not required to display a signal word. These products fall under the acute toxicity classification of category 4 with very high oral and dermal doses and only slight concern for skin, eye, or respiratory injury. Precautionary statements contain statements to help you decide what precautions to take to protect yourself, other people, or animals. Statements are sometimes listed under the heading hazards to humans and domestic animals, and they may be found in several sections of the label. This is why you need to read the entire label completely before you purchase a product and before you use a product. Precautionary statements list the minimum personal protective equipment required when using the product. The type of PPE may vary depending on the job. For instance, mixing, loading, or applying may have different requirements. If a respirator is required, the applicator must have a medical evaluation and fit test before using, before using the respirator. Sorry. And so here we have, essential PPE, and then if you're working in a non-ventilated space, you may need other respirators, and you may need eye protection as well. So it's important not to assume that all formulations of a product have similar labels and similar PPE requirements. So here we've got two types of Garlon, and you can see they have very different percentages of the active ingredient here, and different signal words and different PPE. So always, always, always check labels, and don't assume that the label has not changed since the last time you used that product, because they do change. There are also first aid statements, which they used to call statement of practical treatment, which will list emergency treatments recommended in case of poisoning or accidental exposure. And these can be fairly comprehensive, and they will usually include a hotline number as well. And they may include a note to the physician on specific treatment, particularly on highly toxic pesticides. So here we can see this note to physician talks about impairing clotting ability and the need to administer vitamin K1, as well as information for veterinarians. Physical and chemical hazards describe possible fire exposure to chemical hazards. Some of them should be common sense, like not to use water-based sprays in conduits, motor housing, junction boxes, switch boxes, or other electrical equipment because of possible shock hazard. Pesticides can also be harmful to the environment. Look for warning labels, special warnings on the label, especially hazardous if they're hazardous to wildlife such as fish or bees, or have groundwater or surface water contamination concerns. And so, for instance, many pesticides now you may not apply. After all this time, we're finally getting to how you actually use the product. And these instructions will protect proper mixing and how often and where and when the material should be applied. So agricultural versus non-agricultural. Agricultural use pertains to the worker protection standards that covers farms, forests, nurseries, and greenhouses. If you are working in any of those places, your workers need to be trained and equipped according to worker protection standards. Non-agricultural use pertains to all other uses, okay? So directions for use will tell you where to apply, okay? And usually this is a pretty comprehensive list. And remember, the site where you're going to apply it must be listed on the label for you to be able to legally treat that area. And then it will, of course, also show how to apply spot applications, other forms of application that are allowed, what the use rates are, and when to apply. All labels also contain instructions for appropriate storage and disposal of containers. And a universal caution is do not put concentrate or dilute material into food or drink containers. Pesticides should be stored only in pesticide containers, and any secondary containers must be properly labeled. So in no case can you use an old milk jug or a juice bottle to store pesticides or dilutants. Excuse me. Label also will provide information on how to dispose and handle empty containers. Pennsylvania does have a pesticide container recycling program. And if available, that is the best way to get rid of your pesticide containers. Pesticide containers may also be disposed of after triple rinsing or by pressure rinsing. And you're probably familiar with those. And again, in no case should pesticide containers be reused or refilled. Here's a nice example where the operator needs to carry water on the truck for dilution. Unfortunately, he's using empty pesticide containers to carry water, even though they're labeled. That's just a big bozo no. The residues may leach out of the plastic, and that would be a not good thing to experience. Other parts of the label, okay, we can see the name and address of the manufacturer, net contents, an emergency phone number in case of spill, fire, or poisoning. All of these elements, okay, will be found on a label. There's also some voluntary information. Resistance management has become a big issue in pesticide use. And so increasingly manufacturers are putting the resistance management group numbers on products, which enable you to compare these the groups and ensure that you're using a proper rotation to avoid resistance issues. And these are, as I say, increasingly found, especially on herbicides, fungicides, and insecticides. And these group numbers are designed and maintained by a group, the IRAC, the International Resistance Something Committee. And they have a really interesting website, including a couple of different lists of the materials, which make them quite easy to use by alphabetical or by a category. And I really recommend that people become familiar with the IRAC guidelines if you aren't already, and consider this information in your use of product. So here, you can see some examples of this. Okay, so we're going to take some look at some of the key words here. And another great source for information on pesticides is the National Pesticide Information Center, NPIC, at Oregon State. So spot treatment is the application to limited areas in which insects are likely to occur, but will not be in contact with food or utensils. These areas may occur on floors, walls, bases, or undersides of equipment, and will not exceed 2 square feet. That's 1 foot by 2 foot. If you're spraying more than that, it's not a spot application. Cracks and crevice applications are of small amounts of insecticides into cracks and crevices in which insects hide or through which they may enter the building. Right? A food handling establishment is an area or place other than a private residence in which food is held, processed, prepared, or served. Food is defined as articles used for food and drink for man or other animals, including chewing gum and other articles used for components of any such article. So basically, if it goes into a human or an animal, it's food. That includes ice, for example. The EPA definition of a food area of food handling establishments includes any receiving, serving, storage, packaging, preparing, edible waste storage, and closed processing systems. Non-food areas are areas that include garbage rooms, lavatories, floor drains, eateries and vestibules, offices, locker rooms, machine rooms, boiler rooms, garages, mop closets, and storage after processing. So if there's food present in the areas, then it's food area. If it's a non-food area, you are much less restricted in your applications. Okay, it's also important to make the distinction between mandatory and advisory statements. Mandatory statements are those that must be followed to legally use a pesticide, and they are imperative in their directive. They use words such as do not, must, don't, okay? And so here we see examples before the applicator drills. They must first determine that it's safe. Only protected applicators are allowed in the area. All drill holes must be plugged. Plugs must be, do not apply, do not puncture, do not use, do not treat, okay? That says you cannot do those things, no matter how badly you want to. Advisory statements are recommendations or best management practices that the manufacturer has determined will help with the product's performance or safety. And they'll use words such as should or may. So this product can be applied, okay? Void applications can be made. Utensils should be covered and or thoroughly washed following. But it's easier to cover than it is to wash everything later. We also have special warnings and precautions, including use restrictions. So one important one here, you see this increasingly. There's a symbol for bees here. Do not apply this product while bees are foraging. Other use restrictions are pretty simple here. There may be distinction between food and non-food areas in food handling establishments. So in food areas, application is limited to crack and crevice treatment only. There may also be other warnings or precautions. Here, for instance, remove or tightly cover fish tanks and disconnect aerators. Other environmental hazards will be spelled out. For instance, this pesticide is extremely toxic to fish and aquatic invertebrates. Care should be taken when spraying to avoid fish and reptiles in and around ponds. This is something to pay attention to. And pyrethroids are restricted from to prevent them entering water systems. So you can apply outdoor applications for overwintering bugs, such as box elder and stink bugs, on a wall to a size that is larger than a spot or crack treatment that would normally be allowed, provided the treatment area is above turf or vegetation when the pests are present. So if you got a wall with a bunch of stink bugs and it's a 6x6 area, yes, you can spray that area if it's above turf or vegetation. You may not spray it if it's above impervious surfaces such as driveways, because we don't want that pyrethroid to run off. Rodenticides. Apply in general, apply bait in locations out of reach of children, pets, domestic animals, non-target wildlife, or in tamper-resistant bait stations. If the bait can be shaken from the station when they are lifted, they must be secured or otherwise immobilized. And bait must be used in and within 100 feet of man-made structures. You cannot just use bait randomly in the landscape. Fence and perimeter baiting beyond 100 feet from a structure is prohibited. Burrow baiting with most blocks is prohibited, and do not place rodenticides near or inside ventilation duct openings. Both Bobby and Matt mentioned rat ice. This was approved, EPA approved in 2017. It is a fabulous product. It is still awkward to use. You must buy a label produced by Bell Labs, for instance, from Versisys, from Univar, and you must buy the dry ice from an EPA approved manufacturing facility. And Bell can provide you the names of those. There are basically 5 facilities in the Northeast, including one in Morristown, New Jersey, right outside of Philadelphia. And there's another one in Baltimore and one in New York. So it is possible to use rat ice in this region, but you do need to be careful. There are transportation and handling hazards. However, it is extremely effective and very humane to the rats. And hopefully we can see the use of rat ice and of carbon dioxide in other forms expand. But again, please read the labels and follow the labels. The label is the law. Remember that Section 2EE of FIFRA does not apply if prohibited on the label. So again, you cannot, if things are restricted on the label, you cannot use it for the way that you want, okay? So in this case, for instance, applications with power duster equipment are prohibited. In many cases with disinfectants that we have seen used in the last year and a half, they are prohibited from use in electrostatic sprayers. So use descriptions for dust. Again, it is a violation of federal law to use this product in a manner that is inconsistent with its labeling. And specifically, we have do not enter or allow others to enter. You need to remove and cover exposed food and drinking, dishes, utensils, etc. Application, again, our applications with power duster are prohibited and only as a spot treatment, okay? For applications within food areas, and it is limited to crack and crevice treatment only using a bulbous duster, okay? Supplemental label is a term to describe labeling that includes newly approved uses, use directions, or other instructions that have been added since the last accepted master label. These are partial labels distributed with the product by the registrant or by distributors. As partial labels, supplemental labeling must bear a statement directing the user to the EPA registered product label for complete direction and precautions, and the statement that the product label must be in the possession of the user. So an example of this would be Nuvan pest strips, which have a supplemental label for bed bug eradication that has different use characteristics than the actual label itself. but in order to use it for bed bugs, you must follow that label, and you must actually have that label in your possession at the time of use. So here's another supplemental label specifically for stink bugs. And you can see that it has been, it's a permitted use under Section 2EE, but has not been submitted to the EPA. And it is allowed for use in Pennsylvania, along with a relatively small group of other states. So again, read these supplemental labels very, very carefully and make sure that you are, in fact, doing a legal application. And you must have this label in your possession, as well as the original label. Special local needs labeling authorizes states to register a new end-use product to an existing or imminent pest situation. And it's a local need within a state that cannot be controlled by a currently registered product. But a good example of this is here, Transect is used as a trunk spray for control of spotted lanternfly on Tree of Heaven only in the state of Pennsylvania, and only before the end of 2022. So this label would not allow you to use it in Maryland or Delaware or New Jersey, even though you may simply be on the other side of the border. And again, this labeling must be in the possession of the user as well as the original master label. Basic rule of thumb, sites must be listed on the label. Target pests do not need to be listed except for rodenticides, and any application method may be used unless prohibited on the label. And you can never apply at a rate higher than on the label. And labels change, okay? There is no standard format, and other warnings, restrictions, and other enforceable language may be spread throughout. Again, read the entire label before purchasing or using a product. There's another concern that has emerged in the last couple of years with the adoption of global harmonization systems of hazard communication. There's a problem in that EPA did not adopt the global harmonization requirements, and EPA requirements supersede the requirements that OSHA has for the safety data sheets. And so this can lead to some very confusing contradictions between a label and a safety data sheet. And while the label always trumps the safety data sheet, I would strongly recommend looking at the safety data sheet. And if there are particularly confusing inconsistencies, you may want to talk to the manufacturer about it. So you'll see that the safety data sheet requires information that the pesticide label does not. It also is important to realize that signal words are defined differently, that OSHA does not have a caution signal word, and EPA does not require signal words for environmental hazards, which GHS requires along with pictograms. And so these GHS pictograms are probably useful. I do recommend reading the SDS as well as the label, particularly before use. And so Ed Crow says, make sure you read the label directions first. Know how to use the product before you apply it. Always use the product on the labeled site. Okay, so we made it through that. Any questions? I'm happy to take them. This is my contact information. And let me see if I can turn my video back on. Sorry, having a cranky experience here with my.
That's all right, Diane. If anybody submits questions, I can read them out to you through the Q&A.
Okay. All right. I'm going to stop sharing and any questions, comments, or complaints?
Looks like we don't have anything at the moment.
Okay, that's fine.
But again,
this is a pretty standard subject, so.
Well, if anyone, oh, actually, here we go. We have one that comes through. Oh, it just says thank you.
You're welcome.
All right. Well, if anybody does have questions, please do make use of the Q&A, and Diane will be able to answer those as we move through today's presentations. But if there are no other questions at this time, I will go ahead and move on to our next presentation, which is by Ray Delaney on the Pennsylvania Hypersensitivity Review. This is a pre-recorded talk, so just give me a moment as I gear things up for that.
Good afternoon. Today I want to talk to you about the Pennsylvania Pesticide Hypersensitivity Registry and how it affects us as pest management professionals. As you'll see, this is the latest edition of the Pesticide Hypersensitivity Registry. It comes out twice a year, July 15th, or this was July 15th edition. It also comes out every March 1st. But always, at any point, you can access this list and the information in this booklet at www.paplants.pa.gov. And I suggest you become familiar with this particular website because once you type in all your credentials, it will give you not only this information, but give you information about the beekeepers. The other thing I want you to notice is this registry is updated constantly, and the online version is updated constantly. Since the last publication, this registry has 11 new and 18 changed listings, and you'll see where that becomes important as we move a little bit further into the presentation. So what is the Pennsylvania Pesticide Hypersensitivity Registry? It's a it's a list of people who have been identified by their healthcare provider as being sensitive, in this case hypersensitive, super sensitive, extra sensitive, whatever term you want to use, to exposure to chemicals. So not only do pesticides fall into this category, but really for these folks, probably most other chemicals. It may be paint thinners, not only the pesticides we use, but herbicides that are used, pool chemicals, cleaning chemicals. These are folks who have said, who have been able to document with their physician that they have some negative physical reaction when they're exposed to these chemicals. And so therefore, they've asked to have themselves placed on this list. And this list, as pest control operators, we are compelled to use this list to contact these folks, and the information in this list to contact these folks to let them know when we are doing pesticide applications in within 500 feet of one of the address they have listed. And you'll see as we go through this, they have the opportunity to list not only their home address or school address, but their work addresses, and in some cases, address of maybe a vacation home or a family home where they're a caregiver for another relative or what have you. So you may see multiple addresses for some people. When we get to the Philadelphia list, I'll show you in a few minutes. You'll see that some people have multiple addresses listed. For you and your counties or your jurisdictions, your municipalities, you may only have the vacation home listed, or you may have a school listed. So, but I urge you to become familiar with this list. I know that we're really at the end of our mosquito season for most of us who are attending this conference where we do mosquito control work. So this would be good to look at in the beginning of the season, obviously and throughout the season for updates. But now that we're kind of winding down, this may be a good opportunity for you to become more familiar with the hypersensitivity registry and what the addresses are that are listed on the registry for your area of responsibility. So what are the notification requirements? I'm going to read this first line because it might make it explain a little bit easier than I can. So once listed in the registry, pesticide businesses are required to make notifications to you, person on the registry, 12 to 72 hours in advance of any pesticide application to an attached structure or an outdoor above ground application that they make within 500 feet of any location you have listed in the registry. Sounds pretty easy, right? And it is. You're going to see that it's, you make this notification by speaking to an adult. You can do it by personal contact, email, leaving a message answering machine, certified mail, posting a notice at the front door if you can't really get them on the phone. There's a myriad of ways. We're in, 2021, going into 2022. We can reach anybody, text, email, whatever. The idea here is that you want to make sure that you notify them of the work that you're doing and what you're doing. And I'll tell you in a second what we need to tell them. I do want you to remember, though, in this line at the bottom here, remember, a listing in the registry does not prevent the pesticide application from being made. The being on this registry compels us to notify these folks when we're doing this, but it does not compel them or does not give them the opportunity to tell us we can't spray, to dictate what chemicals we can use, what equipment we use, when we can use it. It just requires us as the certified pest control or pesticide applicator to notify them we are doing this work. So how do we make these notifications? So again, 12 to no less than 12 hours and no more than 72 hours. So you can't give them less than half a day and you can't give them more than 3 days. And that window has to be smaller than 24 hours. And really the idea here is you're giving them the information they need to make an informed decision as to whether they want to limit their exposure by going to another address, going to another home, visiting relatives, whatever. And in some cases, we've dealt with this in Philadelphia with this list for some time. There was actually a City of Philadelphia health department employee who was on this list at one point, and we would take this into consideration when we were doing pest control work in and around the building she worked at. And if, to give me an example, if we said, hey, we were working at this one building, we need to do some treatment there, tomorrow she would work at an alternate location. She had a position in the department that allowed her to work at multiple health centers, so it gave us some flexibility, obviously, and gave her some flexibility too. So the idea here is just notification. It isn't having to change your plan or change your method or change what products you're going to use, but really notifying them. And how do you do that? You need to notify an adult at one of the listed numbers that they leave. Leave them a message on an answering machine. You can leave a door hanger if you can't get a hold of them with two attempts that reach them by phone. You can always use certified mail, fax, text, or email, or you can provide this by personal contact. I can tell you from my experience, I've used mainly the email option and reaching them out to by phone. And you'll see when the list is up here, and I think the next slide, at least my local list, you'll see that there is loads of ways of getting a hold of these folks. So what do you need to tell them? The date of the application, location of the application, the earliest possible start time, and then the latest possible finish time. Remember that range has to be no greater than 24 hours. You need to let them know the brand name of the product you're using, the EPA registration number, the active ingredient, and again, all that information really comes from the label, and we've had a label review, so we know exactly what's on there and where to get that information. The business contact information, so the information for the your employer and who you represent, how you can be reached, your business license or your BU number that's on your pesticide license, and chances are it's probably plastered on the side of your vehicles. And if a request is made, a copy of the label of the pesticide label should be provided within 10 days of the request. So there's a couple, I guess, exceptions, or some exceptions at the bottom. I do want to remind you, though, that you are required to keep records of this notification for 3 years, just like you would for any pesticide application. And so, I definitely recommend keeping track of that. So what are the exceptions? Don't need to give them a notification if it's within a detached structure. If it's the pesticide is directly below the soil surface. If it's in a tamper-resistant bait station. if it's an application to a tree or utility pole by means of injection, if it's an application of swimming pool or pool maintenance chemicals, or if it's in a disinfection or sanitizer, disinfectant or sanitizer. So, I'm working or describing my experience with using the list in Philadelphia. We've used it for notifying folks when we're doing barrier sprays for mosquito control, when we're doing ULV treatments for mosquito control, and while we're doing the truck-based aerial or truck-based larviciding for mosquito control. When it comes to rodent control work, there really isn't. I haven't found a category where I need to do that. Obviously, for those of you familiar with the work that we do here in Philadelphia when it comes to rodent control work, it's either in a tamper-resistant bait station, or we're placing rodenticide in a burrow that's below the ground level, so it really doesn't fall into that. But for these categories where you're putting chemicals into the atmosphere, mainly through spraying or misting, this is really where this fits in. And so here you'll see the list of the folks in Philadelphia, and this is just a scan of the current list, and I would hope it's appropriate to share it with you folks. This is something that as pest control operators in Pennsylvania, you all have access to this list, but I would also ask you not to share any of this information publicly. But for example purposes, I put this slide in here, and you'll see that, as I mentioned, Philadelphia's list probably isn't as big as it could be. We're a city of 1.5 million, and I really only have a handful of people and a slightly longer list of addresses. But you'll see that each person has multiple phone numbers, emails to leave, and for an example, there is one of the residents closer to the bottom of the screen there. You'll see has their residents listed, 2 secondary addresses, and a work address, and then right below that person, you'll see that there's a resident or a hypersensitivity listed person who is not a resident of Philadelphia normally, but obviously attends school here. And so I caution you to make sure that you're familiar with this list and you check it regularly, especially when the updates come out every 6 months, because the names, you may see names that ride this list forever or for the longest time, and some of these names I've seen here for many, many years. But I do see new ones pop up and some drop off because they're temporary residents because they're attending school, or they use an address in Philadelphia because it's a work location that they may or may not be working at at the time of the next publication of this list. So the list changes a little bit, and like I said, in the first screen here, I showed you that or second slide, I guess, I showed you that there was 11 new and 18 changed listings in this publication, or in this edition of the hypersensitivity list. So again, keep a close eye on these addresses and these locations. Now you can do what we did here in Philadelphia. We took those addresses and we plopped them into a map. And no, this map isn't as accurate as the list that I showed you a second ago. It does give you a good visual as to kind of know the general areas of where these addresses are and where these folks are active. But it's also, if I post this, it's a great reminder for our staff here that this is a consideration we should take into when we're considering using pesticides. So I want to take a moment to talk about just a little bit about bees. As I mentioned, the hypersensitivity list is printed twice a year and sent to you, but it is always available. An updated version is always available at that paplants.pa.gov website. Also listed there is the registered beekeepers. Beekeepers are registered with the Department of Agriculture here in Pennsylvania. And it is a requirement for those of us doing mosquito control work with the PA-DEP that we notify these folks too. For those who are familiar with beekeeping, and I am not a beekeeper or beekeeper expert, so please correct me if I'm wrong, or at least excuse my ignorance, but the impression I've gotten is when we are doing mosquito control work, obviously we're putting down products that could be detrimental to the bees, the bee populations. And so, but most of the time we're doing this work is when the bees are less active. We're doing this work at night after the sun's gone down. So I think an easy fix for the beekeepers is when we notify them that we're doing a spray, they can cover their hives with a tarp, we do our spray. They take they take that tarp off in the morning, rinse it, clean it, throw it out, whatever they do with it. But at least the bees or the hive have not come in contact with any of the pesticides, and therefore they're protected, and they can continue to provide the service that bees provide. None of us could survive here without food, and none of us could have food if it wasn't for the work that these bees do. So as much as we want to control pests, we definitely want to protect the bees while we're doing such. I threw these last two slides in here to remind us that there are sometimes regulations outside of what we already covered, right? We've already covered the label as the law, the regulations or the responsibilities that go along with the label, and the hypersensitivity regulations that require us to do the notifications. But sometimes there's a law or regulation that pops up that affects how we do our work. And so in this case, in Philadelphia, there was a regulation that came into effect, a law that came into effect last year, that limited the amount or the type of pesticides that can be used on public property. Between this and the next slide, you'll see that California law bans rodenticide use, and you'll see with these two examples that there's sometimes local laws, or in this case, this particular side is state law, that changes or regulates the work that we do on top of the other regulations we follow, whether it's the label or the hypersensitivity registry or whatever regulations may come through. So I caution you to become familiar with these laws. As I mentioned, this California law does not affect us here in Pennsylvania, but it may this may be a law that becomes popular, or an attitude becomes popular here on the East Coast, and may affect the work that we do. And so I definitely encourage you to become familiar with pesticide regulations, not only in your own jurisdiction, but what may be happening in neighboring jurisdictions, so you have an idea of what may be coming down the road for you. With that, I'm going to end. If there are any questions, I think we've have this set up so you could probably ask them through the chat. I think all of you probably have my email or know how to get a hold of me. So if there's anything I can do to clarify this for you, please feel free to reach out to me anytime you can.
All right, so if there are any questions for Ray, please go ahead and put those into the Q&A. At this time, we're actually going to have a brief presentation by Barry Pitkoff with Life-A-Tech. So Barry, if you're ready, please go ahead and start your presentation. Oh, you're on mute.
Okay, can you hear me okay? Because I'm in the Pest World Conference Center and it's super loud.
We can hear you just fine.
Okay, I'm actually in the closet of our booth, and on the other side is Pete Rose, who we have for 3 days signing autographs. So we're within about 10-foot proximity of him right now. So I'll tell everybody he said hi. So it's kind of crazy here in Las Vegas. It's my first time here. I need to pull up my slides, share screen. Just bear with me. So, all right. So, within 5 minutes, really what I want to just really provide is a brief overview of who we are and what we do. And some of you might know us, some of you might not, some of you might know our products. But this screen here, basically, this is our full product line. Long story short, the upper left-hand corner here, this is a new technology that is we are currently rolling out in certain parts of the country. The first 3 states on the East Coast in the Northeast are going to be Pennsylvania, Philadelphia, New Jersey. And what this is, we'll go back to that, is this is actually what we call the IGI CO2 eliminator system. And simply what it is, this is an EPA labeled tank of CO2 that is labeled to kill burrowing rodents such as Norway rats, groundhogs, moles, ground squirrels, pocket gophers, and voles. And the beautiful thing about this unit, it's just working off CO2, so there's no monoxide being released. It's totally silent. The rodents don't know that we're there shooting the CO2 into the holes. For instance, with Norway rats, what we do is each burrow will get 3 minutes of CO2, and within the first minute and a half, that rat is put to sleep. And within the last minute of the half, that third minute, the rat has been asphyxiated. So this is, like I said, a new technology that's being rolled out, and the reception towards it here at PestWorld has been phenomenal. So keep an eye out for that. I'm gonna just go back a step. I just wanted to show everybody this picture, because the one thing that I do is when I go train customers, PMPs and whatever, and come in and do rodent trainings, rodent education, I always like to talk about roof rats. And most of us have never seen roof rats or never will see roof rats in this part of the country. However, just to demonstrate, this is a roof rat job. One of my customers called me out on probably 6 months ago. A roof rat infestation, probably an hour west of Philadelphia in a huge warehouse. The roof rats found their way up through translocation, shipping, trucking, etc. And then they found their way inside a climate-controlled warehouse with lots of grain, which allowed them to populate. So it's important to know that roof rats certainly can live in our region under the right circumstances. And although we treat them the same way as rats, you want to be aware what species you're dealing with, because if you're doing roof rat work, you're gonna need ladders. You might need an articulating lift. A lot of your work is going to be done in a different type of setting, high off the ground typically. Okay, so just wanted to throw that in there. This is our full product line at the bottom. Actually, I have a better picture of it coming up. A little bit more about IGI CO2. It's approved for use in municipal, residential, commercial, and field settings. It can be used next to occupied buildings. CO2 gas is non-flammable, invisible, and odorless. Okay, it's a quiet application, and it actually qualifies for certified use under the National Organic Program. Okay, so if anybody is dealing with rodents, burrowing rodents in organic facilities, this might be a solution that's going to help you out. This is our product line of baits. Many people know us from having introduced First Strike, which many people would argue that's the gold standard of soft bait. I would agree, but you know, everybody's entitled to their opinions. But we actually have a line of 4 different soft baits: First Strike, Resolve, which is another soft bait with bromadiolone, which is actually a Leaf-Attack invention. First Strike uses difethylone, which is a very nice, strong active. There's no known resistance to difethylone. But all of our baits, they all have different flavor profiles. Takedown is a great bait if you're working in a commercial environment, you have a heavy infestation and you need to knock that down as quick as possible. You're going to start seeing dead rodents probably within 12 hours or so. It is a neurotoxin, so there is no antidote for it. It's First Strike, Resolve, Flatline, all these other baits, they have an antidote of K1. So it's very effective, but you want to know where to use it. Flatline is our newest release within the last year or so. And this is the only soft bait on the market that is formulated with chlorofascinone. So it is a multi-feed bait. However, the palatability is crazy exceptional. So if you are using an inexpensive block bait currently, and you're looking to up the palatability and move to a low-cost, everyday soft bait, I would encourage you to test Flatline. And by the way, if there's any bait here that you have not used, that you've never used but you would like to try, please reach out to me and we can talk and I'll get you some samples and you can test them out. But Flatline, it's a multi-feed, significantly lowers the risk to secondary if that is a concern of a customer. Generation, I tend to use this bait around my house, actually, especially in the wintertime. I like generation, particularly for your Peromyscus. These are the rodents that live in the woods and, you know, will often come up to the residential homes or structures, especially this time of year. It's a low wax bait with high quality food grade seeds in there, and the mice really love eating it, all right? They find it very tasty. Now, Blue Max right here, all right? This bait here is really used for two reasons. We have an anti-mold inhibitor applied to the bait. All right, so a couple things. If you are currently servicing a third-party audited account, such as like SQF or any of them, okay? I'm thinking AIB, et cetera. The one thing that these auditors don't like to see is bait being crumbled when they open the station. Right or wrong, they don't like to see it. Well, this is specifically designed as a low crumble bait. So that bait looks real nice when these auditors open the station. We also, as I mentioned, have the anti-mold inhibitor. So if you're working on very high moisture areas, let's say crawl spaces, things like that, where you're very concerned about mold growth, this is a nice product to go into because it is able to handle and withstand that moisture. Now, keep in mind, all of the bait is food grade. So at some point, all bait, no matter whose it is, especially with high moisture areas, will mold, but this one here is going to resist it better. Then we have our traditional formulation Mackie, which, I mean, it's super. That was one of our original releases. It uses more wax. It's a low cost bait. And, you know, there's people that's all they want to use is Mackie. Again, why should I use Mackie over Generation or this over that? Sometimes, you know, sometimes I could say like, hey, this is the bait to use. But the fact of the matter is you might have a particular colony that just prefers a different flavor. Maybe one of these baits more is closer in resemblance to something they're currently eating in their diet. So there's no such thing as a perfect bait, but there are baits that I would suggest in different applications. And sometimes you have to play around a little bit. We have a no-tox family right here. We just reformulated, I should say reformulated, kind of repackaged this item here, which is hard to see. This is called no-tox soft bait attractant. They come in 1 pound bags, so it's very easy for everyone to have one on the truck. They're great for if you're doing wild mammal trappings, if you need an attractant in a snap trap or in a tin cat or on a glue board. So that's something, again, if you would like samples, I will get you samples here. And again, Rosol tracking powder, okay? Super effective, but chlorofascinone in its powder forms is 40 times more toxic than bromadiolone. So this is a product that is a restricted use product, super effective, but you have to know how to use it and of course, follow the label, right? So that's pretty much our portfolio. And then baits, then we move into our Aegis line of stations. This is a new release here, Soft Secure Technology. So some of our baits like First Strike and Resolve come in 40-gram sachets, which is great, especially if you're doing large cleanouts, big infestation, things like that. So I'd rather be dealing with a 40-gram sachet of First Strike than 10 grams. It's just gonna save me time on the job. You can just put those right in. This actually lays right in the bait station, and this locks the bait in, okay? So it helps prevent that bait from being dragged out. You can just also use this for any bait you're using as well. These are specifically engineered to fit into our Aegis RP, so it's tight on all the sides, okay? Our Aegis RP anchor, if you haven't seen it and you even want to explore a new station, call me. I'll set up a time, I'll show you it. This has a 12-pound anchor. You lift this up compared to a lot of stations, and you're gonna see why it's such a stable product. It has to do with the poured concrete anchor that's attached. If you notice, we also have 2 keyholes which open up extremely fast, all right? And the nice thing about this is we always, at least, you know, our philosophy is, and it should be, and it typically is pervasive in pest control, is safety, safety, safety. How many times do we go out, right? And then you've seen it where a lock on a bait station failed, and it becomes accessible to children and pets. If that were to ever happen here, and these are super durable, we have a second lock to protect you and the homeowner and that end user from that station being accessible. Here we have, again, we have other rat stations, etc., but these are the most prominent out in the field and popular. We also have a line of our Aegis mouse stations, both solid and clear. Now, the nice thing about this particular station, and I'm going to start with the clear, and you can't see it here, but there are 2 spikes inside, right? We call these secure points. There's 2 chambers in there. There's 2 multiple bait chambers. So here you can see that this one here at the upper left has first strike in it. All right, this has flat line in it. So it allows you to put more bait in, reducing service calls, but these spikes match up from the top to the bottom. So it significantly reduces the chance for that bait to be dragged out of the station. I love the clear lid, okay? My personal opinion, having experimented with it, these shots are taken in my home. And from what the feedback is from my PMPs, is it should be part of every pest professional's toolkit. It doesn't mean you don't have others, but we're talking tools in your toolkit. The main reason is this: if you're doing rodent work and you are not looking above drop ceilings, then you're not really, and I hate to say it, doing a thorough investigation or inspection, because drop ceilings are one of the favorite locations for mice to hide. Mice are always fearful of being attacked by birds of prey. They know drop ceilings provide dark area, so they're hard to be discovered. And they like to walk on the pipes or the wires because it's quiet. They know that predators aren't going to hear them. The problem is this, is when you have to inspect those, and I know what happens because I speak to my PMPs, when they were using a solid lid up in drop ceilings or on top of sill plates in a basement, you have to go on a ladder typically or a step stool, and you're fumbling and bumbling for a key. Literally, it takes about 2 seconds to turn that station towards you, and you immediately see if there's feeding that has taken place or even bait contamination. So now you have the ladder safety where you can maintain your 3 points of contact, but on top of it, you have a huge time savings on your job, all right? So that's the Aegis Clear Lid Mouse. Again, if you want samples, let me know and I'll get you some. I think we'll skip that. And I think, yeah, Ray, that probably takes us 5 minutes or a bit over, so I apologize for that. And that's where I'll leave it, okay?
All right, thank you very much, Barry. And if anyone has questions, please put them in the Q&A or contact him at the information on your screen. Thank you.
All right, thank you, everyone. Have a great day.
Thanks, Barry. Thanks for joining us.
You bet, thank you.
All right, and at this time, I'm going to be launching our last poll of the day. So please do take a moment to answer that poll if you're seeking CEUs from today's event. And I will share a presentation on behalf of Brian Smith at Viseris.
There's only one way we know how to do business. We earn it. Looking our customers in the eye and making promises we know we can keep. Working honestly and transparently towards our shared interests. And building up business without ulterior motives. Just the goal to become a little better every day. We expect our people to stand up for customers, help them find exactly what they need, and be there for them when they've got questions or when they don't know what to do next. Because ultimately, we believe that if we go a little farther and work a little harder, we can all win a little more. Viseris has built more than a generation of relationships delivering exactly on that promise. And while we've never stopped delivering the products, training, technology, and support customers expect, we'll keep pushing forward to create positive impact for your team, your business, and you.
All right, and with that, I think we're ready to transfer over to Ray Delaney, who will be working with Brooke Coder, Jamie Kopko, and Diane Lerman on our core activity of Jeopardy. Ray, take it away.
I asked if you could hear me and I had myself on mute. Okay. You can hear me now, I assume, right?
Yes, we can.
Okay. So as you mentioned, our contestants, hopefully Louise, Jamie, and Diane are on and you've unmuted yourselves. Brooke, I think you're going to jump in here as our judge. And then so the winner, whoever gets the most of the three contestants, whoever wins is going to get a $50 gift card or something from PVCA, and the two runners up will get 25. But for those of you who are viewing, I want you to play at home. So what I'm going to ask you to do is answer the questions as they pop up into the what do we say, the chat, right?
Yes, the chat box. Into the
chat box. And then at the end, probably overnight or maybe next week or whatever, at some point, I'll look through those and I'll tally those up, and whoever answers the most correct questions first will get $50 from us. So hopefully that'll keep you guys engaged in the game, and we'll go from there. I've been playing with this. This is the Jeopardy that I'm using is a presentation I kind of borrowed from another group. So I'm hoping it works well. Oh, it's already starting. Hopefully that works for you guys. So.
Ray, you actually might not be sharing the correct PowerPoint.
Say that again.
You might not be sharing the actual Jeopardy PowerPoint. We just see your kind of one slide.
Oh. And I don't know how to do that. Okay.
Would you like me to share?
No, let me stop sharing and start all over again. Can I do that? Is that work?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. All right. Let me share.
If you have multiple monitors, make sure you're sharing the right one.
I wish I was smart enough to have multiple monitors. But all right, can you see the Jeopardy game now?
Yep, there it is.
Okay. All right. So, okay, and are my contestants all up and on? Diane, you there?
I'm here.
All right. Jamie, I think you're on, right?
Yep, I'm here.
And Louise, you around?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay. You guys all have some. What's that?
I have my cowbell.
All right. Okay. So you want to ring that cowbell?
I do.
All right. So Louise has a cowbell. Jamie, I think you're using a squeaky toy. All right. And Diane, you're using a. Diane's got a kazoo. So that's going to be their buzzer. So again, guys, I'm hoping you guys will have a little bit of fun with this. Not only those playing, but those playing at home. And that it works pretty well. It's a review. In listening to Diane's presentation, it's a review of what he covered. So let's see how this works. Oh, I gotta start the show. That working?
Whoa, fancy.
All right. This is Jeopardy. Okay. All right. Okay. So the topics are pesticide formulations, the pesticide label, which should be pretty easy after we just went through it, toxicity and health, using pesticide safely. I can always hear my own voice saying it. Okay. Management of insects and related pests. And IPM. Okay. There we go. All right. So I didn't really know how to flip a coin, but I figured ladies first. So Louise, we'll see how this goes. Pick a category and a dollar amount. And I think I have a few people help me keep score, but hopefully you guys will help keep score at home. And remember, if you know the answer, type it in the chat box and we'll figure it out later. So hopefully you guys can win a prize as well. So Louise, pick one.
Okay, toxicity and health for 200, please, Ray.
Okay, let's see what we got here. These are the routes of exposure. So if you know the answer, make your noise. Okay.
What
And
are?
that was
Squeaky Toy, whoever that was.
Okay. All right. So
That's
that was Jamie. Jamie, what you know the answer?
What are dermal, eye, oral, and inhalation?
That is correct.
All right. Perfect. All right. Then this is working out. Okay. All right. Jamie, it's yours to pick.
Let's just stick with toxicity and health for 400.
Okay. There are no daily doubles, so don't expect one. All right. This number represents the amount of a toxin to kill 50% of the squeaky toy again. Jamie, what do you got?
What is lethal dose 50% or LD 50?
Correct.
And Brooke will tell you that is correct.
Yes.
Okay.
I think he has to wait until the question is finished before he can respond.
That's fair. All right, we can go with that. All right, but Jamie, it's still your board to pick.
Okay, let's go. We're on a roll with toxicity and health, so let's go for that 600.
Okay. All right, this is the most common route of entry in pesticide poisonings. Jamie again.
Dermal?
Yes.
All right.
Oh, what is dermal? Sorry.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Oh,
yes.
I don't think we're gonna be that harsh. All right. We working on this category, going 800?
Yeah, sure.
All right. This is the number for the poison control. I heard a kazoo.
1-800-222 1-800-222-2222. Yeah.
We'll give it to you. All right. So you're on the board with 800.
Okay.
All right. Now let me see if I can figure out how to get back. Oh no. Oh, there we go. Hopefully. There we go. All right, Dion, it's your board to pick.
All right, let's finish this off with $1,000 for toxicity and health.
Okay. Let's see what we got here. This signal words would indicate the product that is least toxic.
I heard squeaky toy.
All right. All right, Jamie, what do you got?
What is caution?
Correct.
Okay.
I was hoping you weren't hoping for what is no signal word.
You got it right. Okay. All right. So let's pick another category and another dollar amount.
Let's jump it over to management of insects and related pests for 200.
Okay. These are the 3 parts of the body of an insect. Brooke, what do you got?
I think it was squeaky toy again.
Okay.
Head, thorax, and abdomen.
All right. Okay.
Also, you brought up the solution as I was saying it.
Oh, yeah, well, a little quick.
I'll be honest on that one.
Quick on the trigger. Okay. Jamie, still your board.
Management of insects and related pests for 400.
All right. As they say on Saturday Night Live, we can never have enough cowbell, so love to hear some cowbell.
I am banging my cowbell.
Okay. These are the 4 life stages in an insect's complete metamorphosis.
I heard the cowbell there.
What'd you hear first?
Cowbell.
All right.
Okay. Egg, larva, pupa, adult.
Right.
Okay. All right, everybody's on the board. Okay. Louise, where are we going?
IPM for 400.
Okay. Oh, all right. Any organism that spreads disease, destroys property, competes with people for resources such as food, or is just a nuisance.
Squeaky toy.
What is a pest?
Correct.
That is correct. Okay. Jamie, where are we going?
I guess we're in IPM now, so let's do IPM for 600.
Okay. Using other living things that are enemies of a pest in order to control
Oh,
it.
that was-
What
I
do we
think
got,
it was
Brooke?
Squeaky Toy again.
Squeaky toy.
What is biological control?
Right.
All right. Where are we going?
IPM for 800.
Okay. The first step in an IPM program.
I think it was a kazoo there.
All right. I would hope the IPM guy, not that they're not all three aren't. Diane, what do you got?
What is identification?
Do we want to give them that one?
Oh, identify the pest, understands biology. Absolutely.
Yes.
Yes.
You're correct.
You are correct, sir. All right, Diane, where are we going?
Let's try IPM for 1,000.
All right. Big money.
Hey.
Okay. Consider the last step in an IPM program.
Evaluation and document.
Brooke, what'd you hear first?
Well, my dogs are barking now, but I'm pretty sure I heard the squeaky toy again.
Okay. Okay.
What is evaluate your results?
No.
No. What is, and unfortunately I clicked on that so I can't give it up, but it is, what is chemical control? Is that, and for those IPM folks, Diane, am I correct?
It depends. What was the clue again?
What is the last step in an IPM program? And I think also had, it's the top of the IPM pyramid.
Well, it would be for the pyramid, yes.
Okay.
But no, IPM program, starts with identification and ends with evaluation and documentation.
All right, we'll give that man $1,000. Then Jamie, it's your board.
All right. Let's clean up IPM.
200. What does IPM stand for?
Kazoo.
I heard kazoo first.
Integrated pest management. Although we did
Yay.
review a plan that somebody had written for interpretive pest management, which made us think of mice in unitards doing interpretive dance.
I'm picturing interpretive dance too. All right. Well, with that, it's your board, Diane.
All right. So let's go back to management of insects and related pests for 600.
Okay. Okay. Continued use of the same insecticides from the same chemical class may lead to
Cowbell.
Cowbell.
What is resistance?
Yes.
That is correct. All right. Another 600 for Louise. Okay, where are we going, Louise?
Using pesticides safely for 4.
Okay. Hopefully that's right here. A legible copy of this form should always be attached to the container that holds pesticides.
What is a label?
Yes, Cowbell came first. So what is the pesticide label? All right, Louise, still your board.
Pesticides safely for 6, please.
Okay.
Ray.
Pesticide containers are to be cleaned using this method as soon as they are empty.
That was
Brooke?
squeaky toy.
Squeaky toy.
What is triple rinse or pressure rinse?
Yes.
Yes. All right. Okay, Jamie, where are we going?
Let's do management of insects and related pests for 1,000.
Okay. This class includes spiders, ticks, mites, and scorpions.
Squeaky toy.
All right, Squeaky toy, what do we got?
What is arachnids?
Yep.
Or arachnida?
Yes.
There you go. Nice save. Okay. Jamie, where are we going?
Let's finish off insects and related pests for 800.
Okay. An animal can carry and transmit a pathogen from one host to another.
Squeaky toy.
What is a vector?
Yep.
That is correct. All right. Okay. Squeaky toy, where are we going?
Let's do using pesticides safely for a big 200.
All right. Let's see if we can make some money for somebody. Chemical cartridge and mechanical filters are examples of this type of PPE.
Same. It was him again.
Okay. Jamie, what do we got?
What is a respirator?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Where are we going?
Using pesticides safely for 800.
Okay. The amount of time pesticide records must be kept on file and made available to the PDA upon request.
Squeaky toy again.
All right, Jamie, click on that squeaky toy.
What are 3 years?
That is correct. Okay, where are we going?
Let's finish off using pesticides safely.
Okay. In addition to the pesticide label, this form also contains information on proper storage, handling, and environmental hazards related to a pesticide.
Jamie.
All right, Jamie.
What is the safety data sheet, or SDS?
Yes.
That is right. Okay. Where to?
Let's do pesticide label for 200.
Okay. The label is?
Jamie.
All
The
right,
law.
Jamie.
What is the law?
Label is the law. That's correct.
Can you hear my bell?
Can we?
I can't hear it. Can you hear it, Ray?
Are you not hearing my bell?
I guess I'm not. Are you? Can you bring it closer to the microphone? I'm not sure.
Can't you hear that?
I just heard that.
I mean, because it just seems like I'm not getting in there. Can you hear it?
Yeah,
I can hear it now.
The squeak toy is significantly easier to use than the kazoo. It has a mechanical advantage over us.
Yeah, I'm happy with this choice now.
Yeah, you should be.
Well, I appreciate the fun that goes in not only the kazoo and the squeaky toy, but in the cowbell. So, all right, all in good fun. I know all of, and the thing is, I know all of you, the 3 of you playing, know these answers because you all have done this type of education in the past. So, in fact, I think Louise has done this kind of stuff for PVCA in the past. Jamie, obviously, I know, for those who don't know, Jamie's the pesticide educator with Penn State, and Diane, of course, is with the PA IPM program and has spoken to our group before. So where are we going next?
Let's do pesticide label for 600.
Okay, let's jump down a little bit. Hope we hear some cowbell. These words indicate the relative acute toxicity of the product.
Kazoo.
All right, what do we got, Diane?
Signal words. What is signal words?
That is correct. Okay. Brooke, you're not allowed to play, so don't train your dogs to bark. All right.
Let's do the label for 800.
Okay. This symbol is usually posted with these words. I heard cowbell.
Yep.
You hear the cowbell?
Cowbell.
Poison. What is poison? Danger.
Yes.
Absolutely correct.
Okay.
All right. Where are we going, Louise?
I'll take formulations for 200, please.
Okay.
Right?
These chemicals are active as gases.
Squeaky toy.
Squeaky toy, what do you got?
What are fumigants?
Yes.
That is correct. Jamie, where are we going next?
Let's stick with formulations, but go 800.
Okay, trying to win some money. This category of pesticides are categorized as having the active ingredient in solution, usually a petroleum distillate. Okay.
Jamie.
Okay, squeaky toy, what do we got?
What are oil-based solutions?
No.
Anybody else take a shot?
What are emulsifiable concentrations?
What are aerosols? Okay, Diane, let's have you pick the next one.
Let's do formulations for 1,000.
All right, big money. Goggles, masks, respirators, and aprons and gloves are examples of. I don't even know what noise came first.
I heard all three. I think it might have been the kazoo first.
All right, let's go with kazoo.
What is PPE?
Yes.
That is right. All right, Diane, where are we going?
Labels for 1,000.
Okay. Oh, a repeat.
Label.
Cowbell on that one.
Yeah, cowbell on that
The
one.
label is the law.
All right, it's good for $1,000.
All right.
Okay, Louise, where are we going?
Pesticide label for 4.
Okay. This federal agency reviews and approves pesticide labels.
Squeaky toy.
What is the Environmental Protection Agency, or EPA?
Yes.
Okay, all right. Jamie, where are we going?
Let's stick with 400 on our only column left.
All right. So, identified by the initials WP.
Jamie.
What is wettable powder?
Yes.
That is right. All right. And we'll end the game with pesticide formulations for 600. This category of pesticides are formulations with the active ingredient dissolved in one or more liquid solvents.
Jamie.
What are solutions?
Yes.
Of course, the solution is, what is a solution? All right. Well, I think that puts us just about almost a few minutes early, but I hope this was a fun way of reviewing some core material. So I hope that was worth your while. For those of you playing at home, I see there's a lot of information in the chat box. I'll go through those, and we will take care of sending out a gift card or something to whoever wins. Does anybody have a score for me?
We might have to review the tape and come back with the score.
Hold on.
Pretty sure it was the squeaky toy.
Do you have
Yeah, I
okay,
think
and what
so
else?
too.
Okay. Okay, so what I got is Jamie winning at 8,400, Diane at 4,400, and Louise at 3,200. So guys, I really appreciate all of you playing along, because to me, I was trying to find a fun way to get core information out there. So
thanks for putting it together.
Oh,
that was
really
fun.
It really was easy. Well, thank you. I will we'll try to find some better way of making sure that this noises next time are a little more fairly distributed, so it's a kazoo isn't competing with a cowbell or a squeaky toy. So
yeah,
I think
I
with
was
that,
surprised at how difficult that cowbell came over.
Yeah, Okay, with that, let me see. Oh, I thought I had a last slide. I guess I do not. Screen share. So you guys can still hear me?
Yeah.
Emily, is there any, I think we're just, I'm good. I think, you know, I mean, I have 10 minutes to wrap up, but I don't need that. I think just a reminder for everyone, we're starting tomorrow at 8:30. The login credentials you use today will be the same. We have a jam-packed day tomorrow, going from 8:30 to 5 and ending with a great presentation from Stan Cope, who's always interesting and entertaining, and loads of interesting presentations throughout the day. So I hope if you joined us today, you'll join us tomorrow, and I hope there'll be more folks here tomorrow. Emily, what else do we need to cover?
I think just a reminder for those groups from New Jersey, if you're seeking CEUs, you'll have to fill out that survey with your photo ID again at the start of tomorrow's session. We'll share that link in the chat, but you can also just find it now and save it in your browser so you can do that lickety split tomorrow morning. But I think that those are all the details.
I haven't really looked at the chat. Is there any, I guess, though I guess chat's open, is there any questions anybody might have for us as a group before we break for the day? Oh, it could be in Q&A too, I guess, right? We all good? Well, folks, thank you. Thank you for joining us for the first half a day of our day and a half or 2-day conference. I hope you guys got some great information. I hope you enjoyed the speakers. I hope you had fun playing along with our game. And we'll see you here bright and early tomorrow morning at 8:30.
Bye.
Thank you all. Oh, hey, Emily, did you say you were putting that link up?
Yep, I can do it right now.
Oh, because it looked like somebody asked for that. So perfect.
It'll be going out tomorrow morning as well.
Okay. There you go. And is it easy to get a copy of the chat?
Yeah, so I'll have a copy of that I can send you after the meeting, Ray.
Great, perfect. And said it should be pretty easy. I'll just look at whoever the first person who answered correctly, and shouldn't be that hard. So
they are pretty time stamped. I think you might have your work cut out for you.
All right, perfect. Oh yeah, a lot of 445 anyway, but no, it's fine. Okay.
All right.
I think we're all good. You didn't. Well, we didn't have another survey to do, so I think we're good.
Yeah, I think we're fine. And then Dana Mae, I see your chat. It's fine. We have your answers in the Q&A, so they'll still count there. Don't worry about that.
Perfect. All right.
All
well,
right,
thank you.
well,
I'm going to log off Emily, unless you need anything from me.
Nope, I was just staying on in case you had any last minute questions or things from the audience, but it looks like we're okay. So I will go ahead and conclude the session and see you tomorrow morning.
Thank you all. Thank you very much, Emily.
Yep, thanks.
Take care.
Bye.